evening, everybody. Welcome to the Tuesday, March 9th school board meeting. We're going to start off at 6 p.m. with calling the board workshop to order. So we'll start off with a flag salute. Trustee Ramirez, if you could lead us.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We're going to go into a roundtable discussion. It'll be among the board members and staff to address the following topic, and this is going to be for discussion only, so there won't be any action taken on the item. This will be discussion on the Silver State governance training that we received, the trustees and the superintendent received this past Friday and Saturday, and discuss the potential implementation of the program. So I guess I'll start this off, and then Richard, I don't know if you wanted to say a few things before we start the discussion, but as everybody knows, we all attended it this weekend. Trustee Walker had the opportunity to attend it the week prior to us. So we all were in attendance and received the training. And the idea around it was to look at refining how we look at issues and how we look at the district. And what I learned from it is we really have a lot of the pieces in place. Our strategic plan really has been well thought out. It certainly wasn't 100% in conformance with what the Silver State standards are looking at it, but really in many aspects, we were right on target. So what we're going to talk about tonight is whether or not we want to implement it. I don't know why I'm having trouble with that word tonight, in part or in whole or not at all. And so tonight, when we get to it as part of the regular board meeting, it'll be an action item, but that action item again can be adopting it in part, not adopting it, or tabling it for future discussion and action. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Superintendent Stokes to just give us an introduction, and then we'll go from there.
Thank you, President Cassiopo, members of the board, staff. It's good to be with you this evening. Just in retrospect, and maybe my inklings of the meeting that we had, the training, I think one of the things that hit me was that it was just nice to be able to meet in person and not 440 yards away, where we could actually talk and discuss and, hear each other think about something as important as just board planning and how we do business. And so it seemed reasonable that since that training is fresh in all of our minds, that this would be a good time for us to at least start out with a workshop type activity where we could have free-flowing dialogue. We could talk about our experiences. I think it's really important to examine our own activities in terms of how we do run our school board meetings. I was telling members of my leadership team today that the system that we have was really a carryover from Dr. Brzezinski, which was a carryover from Mr. Perry. And so, we've been doing what we're doing for a long time. And maybe it is time for a change. Maybe we're happy for the way it's going. So I think this is a great opportunity just to explore that kind of thinking. And maybe there's something in the middle that seems to appeal to everybody. But I think rather than just go on with the status quo, we at least have an opportunity. Now, that may be what we end up with, but I think it's at least an opportunity for us to talk about how that training appealed or didn't appeal to us, and what were things that we would maybe do different, or what are things that we would keep the same. So I think that'd be a great place to start, is maybe just even talk about your feelings associated with that training that we had.
All right, thank you, Richard. So with that, we're going to keep this kind of free-flowing. There's not really a structure to this discussion, but I could certainly talk a little bit about it, but I think I'll open it up to the board. Does anybody want to start off with any thoughts they had about the training, just some takeaways they had from it? Rich, Trustee Varner?
Yeah, I'll start. I liked the training. I thought it was good. I think it did give us some things to think about. One of the things that is recommended is that 50% of the board meetings are spent examining or reviewing the goals. I thought that that may be a little bit overboard for 50% of each and every meeting. I do think we ought to spend more time reviewing goals on an ongoing basis. I also like the idea of setting specific goals for the superintendent and setting the guardrails in place they talked about, not only for the superintendent, but also for the board. So I think there was some good ideas, and that's kind of what I liked out of the thing.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Let's see. Laurel? Sure. Got it.
It needs,
That's everybody.
it just needs the right kind of touch. I haven't mastered
Everybody's
yet.
homework this week is like
Practice on
finger
the mic.
exercises.
I think there were some good things. I think the guardrails concept was something new that we haven't used. For me, I came home and I understand the goal of SMART goals, but I think with as many things that and as many different goals that the schools individually have with their school improvement plans and with our strategic plan, I have concerns. I wouldn't want every goal to be a SMART goal because I think they are too specific and sometimes restrictive in someone who might think bigger and accomplish more. And then if you don't meet it, then it can give a sense of failure when, there's a different course that you take. So I don't want us to do SMART goals for everything. I do like our goals that we've set forth in our strategic plan, and I think a lot of that works, even if it's not the specific formula that this training is. So I think we can add, I think the way I see it going forward is to refresh our strategic plan and add some of these concepts into it. Perhaps maybe there's a place for guardrails within there, but whereas this is making, and I don't know if we want separate goals for the board individually, but I think we've used the strategic plan as a guiding document, and it's guided so many of our things, and we've had some really big goals in there that have been accomplished, and part of that was by not giving too specific of instructions in that to allow staff to make the most of it. So those are some thoughts that I have with it. As far as our meetings go, I think we do spend quite a bit of time on student outcomes when we have our meetings, even if they're things that sometimes directly don't relate to student outcomes. When we're discussing capital projects, you need to have safe buildings for kids to come to school in when we can come to school. When we're talking about our laptops, we need to have those things available so that kids can learn when we're doing a hybrid model. So that's my thought. I did get a little tired of the self-reflection, I'll be honest, and I told Mike before, if anyone asks me to give an example in this, I'm walking out, because I'm...
No, I can appreciate that. Yeah, actually, my favorite, I'm not going to say what it was, but my favorite quote of the night or of the weekend was, I'll just say it was made by one of us there, and I'm not going to repeat it in a public forum, but it wasn't bad. Wasn't disrespectful or anything. It was candid, and I appreciated it. I'm going to leave it at that. Anybody else? Lupe?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that I really appreciated the opportunity to interact with the rest of the trustees. And we did miss you, Mike. It gave us an opportunity to identify our own strengths and our own weaknesses, and it just really, helped us at the end of the day. I don't know, I felt, closer to the team, so it was a good feeling. In terms of the content of the workshop, I like the SMART goals simply because we are used to it, and that's what we use at work, so I'm familiar with the structure. And I feel that it definitely would be beneficial to incorporate it into our strategic goals. But again, I I would agree with the previous comments made that we do have a very good strategic plan, and it's, there's a lot of work that has been put into it. So we definitely want to take that under consideration. But I certainly feel that we can definitely make some modifications that will help us improve the way we are serving our students.
Okay, thank you. We'll just keep progressing down the lane, and feel free to abstain if you need to, but Dawn?
Actually, I feel very similar, but I love going to these trainings. And one of the big reasons, not only the training, but, just the chance to get together at a different setting, get to know each other a little better. So I missed that this year. So that was nice getting together. That was really great. A couple days that worked well. I enjoyed the training. I enjoyed the Silver State Governance Program. I liked the instructor. I thought she did a really good job. I could go either way. I think we do have a really good strategic plan. I think we have pretty good goals. If we want to modify a few things, put in a few guardrails, I'm fine with that. But I don't really feel strongly that we need to, jump into this, that we have any major problems. When we did the exercises, as far as taking a look at some of our meetings, and we kind of figure it out, we were really close. Many of the times of 50% talking about goals and things that led to goals and so forth.
This meeting is being recorded.
All right,
That's all I have.
thank you, Dawn. Stacy, any thoughts?
Sure, we start recording when I talk.
That's right. No pressure.
No pressure. I thought it was good. It was nice to look back and see how much we've accomplished. And especially when we looked at the charts for the SMART goals and stuff, we had a lot in the very last category, but there was always one that held us back. And to know that without having to gone through the training, precisely for that, I thought was really good, and says a lot about our board and the way that we've worked and the way we've used the strategic plan. Yeah, I didn't like the self-reflection at all. That was no fun at all. Apologize for being late, though. I did learn that part. It doesn't show tonight, but I did learn that part.
We won't even ask.
Right? I think the guardrail thing was really hard for me to still wrap my head around it, and just because of the way that it's put in the negative. But all in all, I thought it was good training. I think that we have a lot of good stuff in place. I think we're looking at tweaking the strategic plan now anyway, with getting some more of the diversity and equity back into it that we've kind of lost when we got the wellness. We were so big on the wellness part, and some of the other parts that we kind of left that out. So, and that's why it's a working document, so we can do those things without having to start all over. So I thought all in all it was good. Missed Mike. There was nobody to pick on me, but other than that, it was great.
Oh, that's good. Thank you, Stacy. And then Mike, I'm sure you heard all the same stuff we did, but it's always interesting to get a perspective from another weekend.
Well, I missed all of you in my sessions also, but it was a great way to get to know the other members of the State Board of Education. And because I don't know them very well, I didn't get to pick on anybody, Stacy. So that was tough. I think some of the takeaways that I would say, when you look at our strategic plan with the 3 areas, and we're looking at adding a 4th for equity and diversity, I think that we have to be really careful that we don't set too many goals, because like we talked about, one of the things for the State Board of Education, when we looked at their strategic plan, there's so many different goals that it's so hard to focus on that. And so part of that discussion was on how do we revise this and make this manageable, and something that the State Board owns, whereas it was just something different. It was something that was prepared by the staff. You know what I'm saying? So I think that we want to be careful of that. I didn't feel like, because I obviously reflected on Carson a lot during that, and I felt like we did a lot of those things just intuitively. One of the things on the last day they talked about is that all future trustees before being elected or appointed need to be trained on that. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that that's something that we could build into the onboarding process for those selected or elected. So, I mean, I didn't feel like it was, I just didn't feel like it changed everything, but it was a good training. Sounds like I had a different facilitator than you all did. And, I mean, there was a lot of time for reflection and kind of getting to know what motivates others, but I think that could have been cut down a little bit too. I too got a little tired of holding myself accountable all day, all weekend.
Thank you. Yeah, my thoughts on it were, I always enjoy training. I think you can always gain positives from every training you go to. And that doesn't always mean you're 100% on board with it. Sometimes you hear things that you're like, boy, that would make sense for us. And you hear other things, you're like, that doesn't really make sense for us. And in this particular training, I tried to remember what the goal of it was. And really, for me, the goal was structure, making sure you have enough structure in place to achieve the goals you've set for yourself and your district, and not have so many that you're struggling to do them. But, I think some of it, while it's important to help keep you on track, the things like guardrails and whatnot, I understand the purpose. I think you kind of started getting me a little too far into the weeds, and really having to worry that, you have to set a guardrail and it has to be a negative statement, but the outcome is a positive result. Not sure you necessarily have to go there. That's one way to get where you're trying to go. But I do like the idea of, this is the goal. Why is it the goal? How are we going to achieve it? And I think if we keep those things in mind, and that's what we try to do on our strategic plan, then we're on the right course. I do think we can incorporate some of what we heard. We're already talking about, and we started initially talking with a group of people, and we're going to keep going on the equity piece that I think certainly needs to be built into our strategic plan. I think, that's going to be important, looking at our goals and making sure, we have some of the elements that they discussed in there. You can call them guardrails or whatever, SMART goals. I like the SMART goals. I don't think they all have to be SMART goals, but certainly you need some. And then whether or not you call them guardrails, just those checks along the way to make sure, you're achieving those goals. I like the idea of controlling your meetings from the standpoint of time. Doesn't have to be totally rigid, but I look at meetings from the standpoint of people that might be viewing the meetings and, might be interested in item number 12. And if, let's say, item number 12 is a financial report from AJ, and that's going to have an impact on staffing, or that's going to have an impact on operations, and a lot of the staff that might impact, have to be at work at 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning, they're probably not going to be awake at 9:45, 10:15 to hear it. So kind of being able to control the length of meetings and let people know when they're coming up to speak, and work with them that, hey, your topic we're thinking is 15 minutes long. And that person, especially if they're at the district level or staff level, they help set that time. So, they're not trying to present based on a time frame I gave them, but they were part of that solution. So when I say controlling meetings, that's kind of what I'm thinking. If Dr. Delphin's going to report on something, we would communicate with Dr. Delphin and go, what do you think? We're shooting for 15, 20 minutes. Does that make sense? And he says, no, I think that works. Or, I really have a lot to say. I'm going to need 30. And we incorporate that in there. And then maybe we look at, can we fit all 12, 13 items on the agenda? Or do we have to slide something to a different meeting? Let's see. That's really, I think, my takeaway from it. I thought it was good training. I always appreciate what what Deb brings to these things and the speakers she has. I mean, we've been real lucky with our NASB directors. And so I enjoyed the training. The accountability piece is always hard. That's fine. I showed up, I was on time all the time, except at the very beginning. Something came up and I had to run into work and I was a couple minutes late, and she asked me right away why I was late and how I felt about it. And quite frankly, I didn't feel too bad. I had to get something done. I wasn't on the beach. I had something to do. But anyway, I enjoyed the training. So I guess the question then is for tonight, and we don't have to make that decision tonight, but do we, from what I'm hearing, and I don't want to put words into people's mouths, but do we want to adopt this as a whole? Do we like parts of it and want to think about adopting parts of it? And are we ready tonight to make that decision? Richard? Yes, please, if you have more to add.
Finally, we've talked some about the guardrails and them being written in a negative fashion, so to speak. But I did some research on what some other boards are doing and some of the guardrails they put in place, not only for themselves, but for the superintendent. And even though they're written, it will not, but some of them are not real bad. For an example, the superintendent will not lower academic standards. I don't think we can disagree with that. The superintendent will not serve on a board where a financial relationship exists. The superintendent will assure no fiscal malfeasance or any illegal activities. The superintendent will not fail to respond to the community, politics, including trustee input. So even though they're written, will not, but I don't really take them as a negative, because we're not really handcuffing the superintendent.
Right.
We're just giving a guideline of you will not do this, but it leaves a whole bunch of stuff that the superintendent still does.
Yeah, and I think some of them are key. And I think it goes for the board really too. I mean, there's certain things, when I look back on the board before I was a board member, you have a lot of people from different backgrounds with, different pros and cons, and maybe some of those guidelines might have been pretty handy, 12, 14 years ago kind of thing. And so if we're going to adopt things like that, I think they should be general, so there's a lot of room for creativity and positive response. But I think maybe it might extend beyond the superintendent as well.
Yeah, for example, for some of the
Stacy will be
guardrails.
next.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Richard, and then Stacy.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't
You're
even look
fine.
down that way. Some of the guardrails for the board that I found that other boards have adopted, and they're pretty simple. The board will not undermine the superintendent's efforts to achieve goals.
Yeah, we can't have that one.
Yeah. Including directing staff and micromanaging, i.e. hires, programs, and budget. The board will not do anything that is divisive to the board or superintendent. The board will have no surprises. I don't know about that. The board will not undermine the board or superintendent's decisions. So, they're just things that you're not supposed to do, but I don't really take them as being a negative aspect, so
Yeah,
to speak.
no, that's a good point. Let's go Stacy, then Mike.
So my question is, and Mr. Stokes, maybe you can answer this. What exactly is the Silver State governance? What cost is it to us? What is your basic overview of it?
Thank you, Trustee Wilkie. As it would happen, Trustee Crossman and I were talking about this just last night. And so she actually is likely to have more information than I have. But one of the things that our trainer said to us during our training was that the Silver State governance process would actually provide for the board, should we embrace the training model, these coaches that I believe for a fee will come and provide coaching or training to help us develop those goals, help us develop the interim goals, help us to develop the guide rails. So I don't think they expect us to just take the training and then figure it out on our own. But I think there's a relationship between a contractor and the board that would actually exist for a fee, and they would help us get set up. Now, the other thing I don't know is, and President Cassiopo has alluded to this, whether or not you have to, invest the board fully, or if a partially immersion in the system works. And I don't know where that line is drawn between where the contractors come in and help us to get established or to maintain this process. So, I think a key question is, are we satisfied, or do we want to modify in some way? Like a meeting like tonight, not necessarily a workshop, but thinking about the potential next 2 hours and what we cover in terms of business, is that, and sometimes the biggest part of our meeting is when we fill the room with students and have their presentation or involvement. So I think those are some key questions that we ask ourselves. Are we using that time in favor of meeting the board's goals or the superintendent's goals or even community goals? And I think there's something to be said for that as well.
All right, thank you. Mike, before we get to you, can we have Laurel piggyback on that?
It worked first time. So I talked to Bridget Peterson because Lyon County did this training last year. And so I said, well, where did this come from? How is it? Because we've, through NASB and through the trainings that we've had, usually there is a couple hours of governance training on different methods of governance and reminding board members and teaching board members how to not micromanage, how to do it. So this is a method of governance. And Bridget told me that the program was developed in Texas and that their facilitator was from Texas who helped develop it. How it got the name Silver State Governance, I'm not sure if that is just what they've named it for our state.
It is.
But it is a program. It's used in other states. Some of the districts in our state who went through the initial workshop that we just went through have elected. Well, I know of one. I know that Lincoln has elected to continue on and do goal setting with them. Lyon County did not. Some of the other districts decided not to continue with that. In talking with Deb, the fee for continuing on with goal setting is around $10,000 to do that. So to me, I'm not sure because we've done the steps at the mastering student outcomes portion of it with our strategic plan where we've gathered stakeholders, community members, teachers, everyone. So I'm not sure that we need to start at the very beginning and do the whole goal programming. I feel like we could take some of the ideas like we would in any other conference where we learned about governance and take some of these ideas and say, hey, we've got a refresh of our strategic plan coming up. Let's introduce some of these ideas. Let's have some of these thoughts as we're refreshing our strategic plan is the way I think about using it. Does that answer your question, Stacy? Okay.
Mike?
I was just going to say, listening to Richard's examples of guardrails, ineffective boards or boards with unprofessional behavior have to adopt those things. And as I was listening to those, of course we don't disagree with those things, but are they relevant for our board? I would much rather put my efforts towards serving the community in ways that are going to be more beneficial or more relevant to what we're working on. And I think when we're looking at budget cuts and tough times ahead, I'm not sure allocating $10,000 towards coaches to work with us on goal setting, which I don't feel like we are deficient in our goal setting skills. I'm just not sure that that's necessary for us.
Yeah, Laurel, then Richard.
Yeah, there we go. I was thinking about that and I remembered when you started talking about it, Mike, with the guardrails, our board has adopted and we have a policy of a code of conduct. And most of those examples of guardrails are included within our code of conduct. So I think we've read it and I'm thinking even the superintendent that he's not going to sit on a board. We follow the ethics laws that are already on statute in our state. So do we need to say that, or is that something that I would hope that I know our superintendent follows them, but I'd hope a new one would follow those as well, because that's part of the position that you hold. So we do have guardrails like that in a code of conduct, is I guess what I'm
Sure.
saying.
All right, trustee Varner. And did I miss anybody? Did anybody else looking to speak? Okay, so Stacy after Richard.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Mike, I agree with what you're saying with our board, but we're not always going to have the same board members. So I don't know if we need them or not. I think they're pretty generic. We could do them probably in an hour, come up with something in an hour. But we're not always going to have the same superintendent. We're not going, like I said earlier, we're not going to have the same board members. So I think to put something in place just for some guidance, extra guidance, is not a bad thing. But I know we have the code of conduct and everything like that, but that's just my thought.
Okay,
And just to respond, when we have new members on the board and a new superintendent, they will set those policies. So we could set them and maybe they would be the same, but it would be the prerogative of the board working with their superintendent to make those policies. So, I mean, I'm thinking right here and right now, what do we need? That's what I was saying.
yeah, and I think, Stacy, I'm going to give you a chance. I just wanted to interrupt real quick. To Laurel's point, I think the guardrails I think they're helpful, but I think in the form of, not so much in the form of guardrails, but in the form of our code of conduct, making sure some of those key elements, those 10 commandments, if you will, are kind of in the code of conduct. We shall or shall not do this, this, and this. I think you get 4 or 5 of those things mixed in with our code of conduct, maybe more, maybe less, we accomplish the same thing. And then if a new board comes in and wants to change it, we have the structure there. And if they want to change it, that's going to be their prerogative, but they'll have to bring it up, review it, and go through the process. Stacy.
As far as the meeting part, they have changed through superintendents, because Superintendent Perry used to bring us reports this long and have the principals talk the whole time. And so it's evolved to what the board wants to do. And then just for the public's sake, Ryan, can you explain to the public how we could meet as a board for this workshop without the open meeting law?
Second time. Trustee Wilkie, do you mean the meeting we're having right now, or a meeting to go over your strategic plan? And
The actual workshop that we had 2 weeks ago, because I got calls on why it wasn't posted and things like that. So I just wanted that explained why.
Sure. The open meeting law has certain exceptions that allow for a quorum of the board to meet outside of the mandates of the open meeting law. It includes, for example, meetings with your counsel to receive information on actual or potential litigation. It includes social gatherings, and training in this example is a gathering in which you're not meeting to deliberate or act on anything within your subject matter or jurisdiction. And so it doesn't mandate an agenda or an open meeting, because you're not taking any action on behalf of the public.
Don or Lupe, did you have anything else on this? Not putting you on the spot, just wanted to make sure I didn't miss you. All right, go back to trustee Varner.
I would just say that I'm not in favor of paying $10,000 to have somebody come in and help us set goals. I think our board is, if we wanted to move that way, we are very capable of setting goals for the superintendent and the district. So I don't think we need to pay an outside consultant to come in.
Yeah, that's my feeling is, that's the one piece of the puzzle I didn't have when we were there last weekend was, how much would something like that cost? I mean, I tried to keep in mind that while this is good information and good training, it is somebody's opinion of what they're trying, what they're promoting and what they're trying to sell to us. And I would agree that given our financial situation and what we're anticipating, that I'm not sure that the $10,000 to adjust and not necessarily arguably improve what we're doing is a good expenditure of the public's money at this time. I think with what we've learned and where our strategic plan is, we can incorporate some of the ideas that, again, like we learned, and make sure that we're happy with our strategic plan. But I don't know that we have to go through the formal process, and I don't know that we're in a position to allocate that kind of money to do so. I think it's something we can do. I think we're on the right track. They told us we're on the right track, and I think we know what direction we're trying to go, and we can get there. Mike.
One of the thoughts I had when I was in the meeting was not everything is going to be directly about student outcomes. And one of the thoughts that I went back to was kind of our celebration of teachers who achieve their national board certification, which is very prestigious for a teacher. That's not related to student outcomes. Is it going to help us get there eventually? I mean, I would say we could probably make a case, but if you looked at that training, examples like that kind of went to that's not a student outcome. And I think that when you really look at the climate right now in education and the importance of attracting and retaining quality teaching staff and staff members in our schools, one of the ways is to make sure they know they're appreciated and valued. And so we can't cut those types of things out. We can streamline them. We probably, that last presentation went a little bit long. So, I mean, there's ways we could streamline it so the public isn't having to, like you were saying, they're wanting to hear about the budget. They want to know if we're going to have sports or band. And so we could streamline some of those things and still appreciate and recognize staff members without belaboring it. But I don't think we want to take that human side away. That's one of the things, we have relationships with this community. They know us. People call us and they say, hey, just so you know, my kids are upset about X, Y, and Z. And I listen to that. Teachers call and say, these are the concerns, or hey, I want you to know this is really going well this year. And I don't know that that's always the case in school boards. But this board has a close relationship with the community, and I think it's because of the things we do. And I think we want to be really careful that we don't make ourselves this board up here that's kind of removed, and we're not valuing the great people we have working for us.
Yeah, those are good points.
Oh, and also, we'll be in other trainings when they're talking about your school board meetings, and they'll encourage you to include celebrations in your agenda, because we need to celebrate the achievements that students make, that staff makes, and have those celebrations. That is an important thing to have in a school board meeting. So I wouldn't want to cut those out either, because it is really important for the students who come and are recognized and their parents. And I think that's an important thing. Sometimes public education takes a beating, and I think we need to do everything we can to point out the good that is occurring in our schools.
Yeah, that's important. I think it's important to make sure that the business of the board is in the best interest of the students. And I agree in doing that, whether it's a direct impact to the students or an indirect impact, recognizing our staff at all levels who work incredibly hard is important to do. And to Mike's point, we are a board that's approachable. We're in a community. Richard and I were having this conversation where this is a community, and one of the reasons why we stayed here as a family for 26 years and going is you can go downtown, you can eat at the same restaurant that the governor's eating at, or see the mayor or meet with the superintendent, or, we get sworn in as trustees and we see, Judge Russell, and, he knows who you are. You say, hi, this is a community that knows each other. And that's really what we should be embracing and making sure that we foster as we take care of these students, do our best to take care of these students. So this is not an action item for this workshop, obviously. It's just for discussion. But I think what I'm hearing when we get to the action item is we're not going to adopt it in a whole, and let me know if I'm out of line. But am I? Yeah, okay, I won't go there. But that's something that's something we'll have to decide. But give that some thought, and then when we get into the action item, we'll talk about it a little more. But that's again what we're looking at, or what are our options and where do we want to go, if we want to go anywhere.
If we decided not to go with it, could we maybe just adopt Laurel's favorite part and start every meeting with an integrity check?
I think with Stacy alone, that's going to wear us down. Okay, unless we have any further discussion, we can keep talking about it, or if we've said what we need to say, we can go ahead and take a break until the board meeting, the 7 p.m. portion starts. Any objections to calling it? Okay, so we'll go ahead and close the board workshop, and please be back here before 7 o'clock so we can start promptly. Thank you, everybody. everyone to take their seats. We are going to call this school board meeting to order. It is March 9th, Tuesday evening. Welcome everybody who's joining us either in person or remotely. We're going to start out with adoption of the agenda.
So moved.
I have a motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any board discussion? Any public discussion?
No public comment, Mr. Cassiopo?
Seeing none online.
All right, thank you. Hearing none, we'll call it. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Okay, any opposed? The agenda is adopted. Item 4, Superintendent's Report. This is for information only. Superintendent Stokes.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board, good evening. I'd like to start my report by letting anybody who may be watching remotely that item number 7 of the agenda, or sorry, number 10, item number 10 of the agenda will deal with a planned return to the schools. And we have translating that for our Latino families, Miss Leticia Serban. And so just wanted you to be aware that that service will be available and might help you as you listen to the discussion and the presentation associated with item number 10. I also like to report to the board that with the assistance of both Mrs. Sear, our risk manager, and also Mr. Mark Cornick, our director of operations, we have approved the use of individual athletic equipment like balls and jump ropes and frisbees, etc., to be used by our students at school during recess times. And each of the schools will be developing a sanitation system and process so that we can allow our students to enjoy that time of play using those kinds of items. I also like to let our community know, I learned today that our school-based health center is going through some changes in personnel, and so that facility right behind the Gleason PDC building is going to be closed for a month. And however, they will have someone on staff to redirect walk-in traffic. So if there are individuals who go there for treatment, they'll be redirected to the other health facility that's here in Carson City. Now, if our school nurses have students at the site that have also been approved for telehealth services, we do have those telehealth services in 10 of our buildings, and so they can families can still receive treatment through that telehealth program. So we feel like we're still in a good place to be able to offer healthcare services to our families. And then my last item is just to thank everyone for participating in our most recent community PLC. We had 82 people who were part of that program at any one time. And the final meeting is scheduled for May 5th. And it didn't dawn on me when I was making this plan that that was also the date of Cinco de Mayo. So in hopes of repairing that, I am going to move that final community PLC to May 4th. So if trustees, if you could put that on your calendar as a save the date, we'll utilize the skills of Mr. Davis to help us get that information out and make sure that we can, at the very least, try to have the same number and same energetic participation in our next community PLC that we had in our most recent one. And with that, Mr. President, that will end my report.
Great. Thank you, Superintendent Stokes. I want to, as we go into board reports, I wanted to take this time just to pay respect to two of our educators who have passed away and ask that we take a moment of silence. Sharon Judd, who is a sped parapro at Fritch, and Galea Manning, who is retired but a longtime educator for our district, both passed away March 2nd. And it's certainly a big loss for their families, and we really appreciated their contributions in our community. And if you would, I'd just like to take a brief moment of silence to pay respect to both of them. Thank you very much. Moving on, item 5, board reports. This is for information only. We're going to start off with Carson High School. We have Sarah Wiggins with us.
Hi there. So at Carson High, we just got started with our fall sports being football, volleyball, girls golf, and tennis. And for that, we just got that started, and it's going to end about the first week of April. We also got some events started going just to try to get everything back to normal. The first one was last night for the seniors, and it was academic letter. And for anybody who didn't get their certificates, they can pick it up either at the guidance office or we'll be handing them out. Another few events coming up is going to be Senior Sunset, and that is planned for May 21st, and that's going to be out in the front grass. More information to come on that. Teacher Appreciation, which is going to be the week of May 3rd, and then we're also planning school beautification coming up in about early April. And then that's it. Thank you.
Good, thank you, Sarah. I had a chance to talk to Sarah briefly, and she participated in golf. I did not ask her what her score was because I'm about as big of a hack as you can be. So I figure anything that's double digits is a fantastic score. I usually don't get there. Let's see. We're going to move to how about a NASB update? Laurel?
So NASB update, you guys probably did see the emails. In case you didn't notice, because I heard some boards didn't hear that the conference planned for the last weekend in March has been canceled. The hotel could not accommodate the number of trustees that would be there within the guidelines still. So we are having virtual training coming up. And March 20th, which is a Saturday, from 9 to 2 p.m. And it has been listed as the new trustee orientation, but a lot of the information that will be discussed is open meeting law, some ethics, I think, and some other areas that are required under the statutorily required training that all trustees are to have in their, and this is the year that we all need it. So I'd invite you all to sign up if you'd like to get some of that training out of the way. The other one is the next Saturday, March 27th, and it's from 9 to 10:30. And that one is on covering an area of equity. So, and we're going to have a speaker from the National School Board Association doing that training. So that's what I've got for NASB right now.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll move to board announcements. Mike, if we could start with you.
So, talked to Ruth Lee Clario today, and Mark Twain donated around $2,000 to the high school, so they did a great job with their fundraiser. Notably absent from that conversation was information about when she will be receiving a pie in the face. So I'll need to follow up with her about that. She also wants us to know that, I think we reported this last week, but I'm not positive, that they have completed their access testing, and so things are moving smoothly. And for reading week, she was able to take a little trip in a hot air balloon, so that was exciting. And I'll conclude my report with just saying I was able to revisit some Fritch friends and do a read aloud for Mr. Williams' class. And it was great to do a Zoom read aloud because I could incorporate some of the students from my school and as well as some of his students and do a read aloud and have a nice discussion. So that was time well spent.
Good, thank you. Stacy.
You might have seen an email that Renee sent out about the trainings, and Laurel went over those too. There is the national conference that's going to be a Zoom conference that for the national school boards, and that'll be April 8th through the 10th. And I have to go as the Pacific region president, but they're having a special right now where it's one goes for free. So if there's somebody else that's thinking about doing that, let us know, because I have to let Renee know that I'm going to. So just to let that, so there's no cost to the district that way.
All right, thank you very much. Dawn.
Nothing from Eagle Valley tonight, but just wanted to add to the Carson High School, the first home football game will be March 19th, and the Blue Thunder Marching Band will be part of that, and they will have a kind of an adjusted halftime show, and they'll be playing throughout the game.
Great.
That's all I
Glad
have.
to have them back. Trustee Ramirez, Lupe.
So for Empire Elementary School, the students read 3 million words for the week, and the principal and vice principal are going to do a mini performance for them to praise them for their work. So it's exciting. And then for Silliger, the kindergarten registration for the 21-22 school year will begin on April 5th. And then they had, on the 17th, they will have the Lubricant Chase event, which is a fun event for the kids and the specialist, and everyone just gets together and have a fun memorable event for the kids. So that concludes my report.
Great, thank you. Laurel.
Oh, there it goes. Okay. So for Fritch Elementary, they would like to thank all the parents who participated in Reading Week. And they just said it was so good to see the kids dressing up and having fun again. For Fremont Elementary School, they have upcoming a PTA fundraiser. It will be cookie dough and other goodies with an online-only option for ordering that for their PTA fundraiser. And also, they'd like to report that they had a fantastic Reading Week with fantastic support from lots of community members. The mayor attended via Zoom, as did some of the local celebrities. And administration and some teachers are scheduled to be slimed on Friday because their students exceeded their reading minute goals. And then just one other thing that I'd like to report for Carson High that Sarah forgot is fall sport cross country started, which is my favorite because my kid runs in it. So anyway, the kids are running, and there will be another cross-country meet in Carson on Friday, March 19th over at Prison Hill, and there's lots of social distancing on our cross-country track. So it was really great to get out there and see the kids, just the excitement that they had for being able to compete again. You could feel it, and there was a lot of joy among all the kids there, even though they're dying as they're finishing the race. They weren't all dying, but they're worn out, but still happy. And that's my report.
Thank you. It's a good kind of dying. I'm a runner, and my son ran, and yeah, if you're gonna hurt yourself, that's one of the many great ways to do it. No, these kids they're amazing. They're strong kids. Richard?
Yes, at Carson Middle School, Principal Sadler reported that the sixth grade students at CMS returned to school full-time with such great spirit and excitement. The majority of students have reflected and shared how grateful they are to be back in school 4 days per week. And they're also looking for parents/guardians, students, and community members who might be interested in joining their continuous improvement team for a Zoom conversation about the school. And that'll be coming up before long, and they'll be sending out information about it in Parent Square. So anybody who's interested, just keep an eye out for that. It'll be coming out shortly. And then, well, actually, the Zoom meeting will be held on Monday, March 22nd at 1:30 p.m. So, and then at Boardwick, they just reported that the reading week last week went really well. The kids really seemed to enjoy it, having the opportunity to dress up, and the teachers enjoyed the event also. So they just want to let everybody know that it went really well. That's it, my report.
Great, thank you. And I'll give a report on Pioneer. I received an email from the principal, and oddly enough, this email, the text starts out one size and gets progressively smaller as we get down the page, so bear with me. Yeah, I might need it. But anyway, Pioneer student body and staff want to express their appreciation for their school social worker, Daniel Langham. Pioneer High School's debate team had a great experience at the Digital State Championship. Students competed in the Lincoln Douglas debate, mock Congress, duo interpretation, and U.S. extemporaneous speaking. The team learned a lot from the tournament and is excited to apply the feedback from the judges and insights from both success and failure to their next tournament. And then last, sophomore Lily Cordova was nominated for the NCWIT Award for Aspirations in Computing by her engineering teacher, Kristen Steinkress. This award honors 9th through 12th grade students who self-identify as women or non-binary for their computing-related achievements and interests and encourages them to pursue their passions. Award recipients are selected based on their aptitude and aspirations in technology and computing, as demonstrated by their computing experience, computing-related activities, leadership experience, tenacity in the face of barriers to access, and plans for post-secondary education. The multi-tiered award structure includes winner, honorable mention, rising star, and certificate of distinction designations at national and regional affiliate levels. Lily received the regional honorable mention, so everyone wanted to congratulate Lily and also to thank Mrs. Steinkraus. So that's the report from Pioneer. We're going to move on to association reports for discussion only. Do we have any association reports? Anybody chime in online or?
Seeing none online.
No, Mr. Cassiopo.
Okay. Next, we're going to move into public comment. And as I think most people know, public comment, we're asking everybody to limit their comments to 3 minutes and not just to repeat the speaker in front of them. But public comment is intended to express thoughts, ideas, or concerns on items that are not on the agenda. If you have, if you want to speak regarding an agenda item, we offer public input on each action item. So right now for public comment, do we have any?
Yes. Betsy, you are cleared to talk. You may need to unmute yourself.
Hi, Betsy.
My name is Betsy. Hi, my name is Betsy Campbell. I am a 7th grade student at Carson Middle School. I would like to be the voice of change for a practice that has been happening multiple years that I feel is harmful to students. The school announced the names of students who met MAP school goals, and the students who did not make the goals are embarrassed and humiliated. The goals for tests should be private, and no student should be made to feel bad about themselves or their academic growth. Our students' population is diverse, and there are many reasons students may not meet a goal set by the school. Some students don't test well, some may not speak English, and some may not be well-fed or well-rested. No matter the reason, all students should be celebrated for their efforts instead of left feeling inadequate and embarrassed in front of other students. I have ideas for the school to support all students with test anxiety and stress management, and better ways to encourage students to do their best without punishing the ones who struggle. I will be sharing these ideas with the school district, and I hope my voice helps others.
Betsy, thank you. I know public comment sometimes isn't easy, and we'd appreciate any input you might have. You can reach out to us directly or reach superintendent or your school administrators, but we would enjoy hearing from you.
Thank you.
Any additional public comment?
Seeing none online.
None online, Renee?
Yes, Mr. Cassiopo, I have several that were emailed in. Our first public comment is from Lucas Vasquez, who attends Carson Middle School and is in the 8th grade. His concern is that he will be at risk of failing all classes and passing 8th grade, as well as contracting COVID-19 and spreading the virus around to the people he loves and cares about. So please don't make us go back to school full-time throughout the whole week. The next comment is from Susan Aikihara from Mark Twain Elementary. She's the library media technician. As the library specialist at our elementary school, serving 550 students each week, I must say that I can barely perform my duties, even with Mondays, to work in the library uninterrupted, and I must admit there are a number of aspects of my position that I cannot get to. My primary task on Monday includes reshelving books from quarantine that students check out, and pulling books that students have placed on hold since they are not permitted in the shelves. Add to this high rate of breakage and intentional damage we are finding with our Chromebooks and other laptops, I am literally drowning in tasks. This is with 2 remote classes on Mondays, 1 time per month, each if that. Any holiday precludes these students miss another class, and there are more than a few. This is the only day my colleagues and I can meet every other week to brainstorm or problem solve. We only have 6 weeks, discounting the holidays and time off, left to go in the 2021 school year. And as we're entering testing season, I feel it would be detrimental to reinstate Mondays as a full in-seat day for our students. I appreciate that this year, of all years, having Mondays to plan, arrange, sort, and update a myriad facets of our positions and has been extremely valuable to allow me to better serve my students. Thank you.
Thank you.
This comment is from Mr. David Deneen, computer specialist at Seeliger Elementary. He does not support having students come back to class on Mondays this year, and the reasons are as follows. I need this time to Zoom with my remote students. I don't have enough time in my schedule to meet with my computer science remote students. If I don't have this time on Mondays, my remote students will have to just work from home through my Google Classroom without my support. High flex teachers really need this time to plan and collaborate. They have been tasked with the jobs of 2 teachers this year. I need this time to collaborate with my computer science peers. There are not enough Mondays left this year to make this change worthwhile. Thank you. This comment is from first grade teacher Molly Martin, Mark Twain Elementary School. Ms. Martin would like to comment on the value of Mondays this year, which have been set aside for asynchronous instruction, professional development, and teacher collaboration. The workload this year for teachers has definitely increased as we have been asked to design and present lessons both virtually and in person to varying degrees in each quarter of this ever-changing year. This has demanded a lot of time learning how to use the programs, teaching our students and families how to use them, posting all the lessons, and going back to review and give feedback on completed work. The time we've had on Mondays to wrap our heads around all the constant changes as well as prepare for the upcoming 4 days of in-person instruction each week has been critical. I believe I have been a more effective teacher and team member as a direct result of having this dedicated time. The opportunities for collaboration have been incredible. In a typical year and typical day, there is almost no time we have in common to meet and discuss. This year, because of having Mondays more flexible, I have been able to collaborate not only with my grade level team, but consult with specialists, related art teachers, support staff, administrators, coaches, and parents, all for the direct benefit of students. I have held live Zoom meetings with my class every Monday as well, and have had an average of 80% attendance or higher each week. I'm very impressed with how students and families have continued to consistently engage with the remote assignments and the weekly Zoom meetings. In my experience, Mondays have been utilized effectively for all their intended purposes, and I ask that you please allow them to remain for the same purpose for the remainder of the school year. Each Monday, every staff member has completed a Google form to help account for how we spent our day, and this has been a good way for me to reflect on how productive these hours have been. One of the greatest benefits of the Monday time has been for my personal mental health. In a typical year, I spend 10 to 20 hours each weekend planning for the upcoming week and catching up on things from the previous week that I didn't have time for. This year, because of having the time on Mondays to work on those things, I've been able to cut my weekend work time to 5 to 10 hours, allowing more time for my family and for self-care. I haven't felt the immense pressure Sunday nights typically bring with making lists of all the things to do early Monday before students arrive and making sure all my plans are in order. I have had space and time on Mondays this year to accomplish some of these things and even the greater level of effectiveness because of the collaboration opportunities. It has been very refreshing and one way I feel the district has kept employees' health and sanity as a priority. I start feeling anxious when I picture going back to 5-day instruction, pushing more work to the weekends, losing the valuable collaboration, and having to spend more time before and after school throughout the week doing the really...
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry. We reached the 3 minutes.
Okay,
but thank you. We'll put that into the record.
okay. The next comment is from Lynn Garrett from Carson High School. And this is in regards to Mr. Wallace. She wanted to personally say a few words. 2 of her children had Mr. Wallace and have told me that he was one of their favorite teachers at Eagle Valley Middle School. They really liked him as a teacher and a mentor. I have one more,
Okay.
Mr. Cassioppo. This comment is from Miss Tiara Babula. She's a 5th grade computer science teacher at Mark Twain. This year has been one of many challenges, and we have all needed to be extremely flexible, patient, and understanding with the constant changes. I'm grateful that our students in grades K-5 are able to attend school Tuesday through Friday every week. Monday this week, I heard that having students attend on Mondays as well for the rest of the year was going to be discussed at tonight's board meeting. I'm writing in to express my concerns on taking Mondays away from the teachers the rest of the year and having students attend 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. And she has listed a few concerns. There are only 7 Mondays in the 4th quarter if you exclude the holidays and non-school days on the 2021 revised calendar. Currently, I'm able to Zoom with the 2nd and 3rd grade remote students once a month for their synchronous class time. The other weeks, I don't see them in the month. They are expected to do asynchronous learning. This has been very difficult to establish connections with the students, keep them motivated and engaged, and help them with their learning and assignments when the schedule only allows me to be able to Zoom and meet with them once a month. If you decide to have students come in Mondays, I will be unable to Zoom at all of those classes for the rest of the year. I feel that they have already not had the same access to the standards and myself as our other students, and this would even more so make it inequitable. Mondays is when we have our staff meetings, on-site PLCs, cross-district PLCs, attend professional learning opportunities, attend IEPs, 504 meetings, have parent conferences, be available to join on Zoom to help students and families. Mondays have also been very valuable for myself as a specialist when I'm having to plan, create, and push out asynchronous lessons and synchronous lessons to our students in grades K-5. The rest of the week is rarely interrupted by all the things mentioned above because we have Mondays to do these things and can focus on teaching our students, doing interventions with groups of students, etc. When will classrooms, bathrooms, high touch points, etc. be deep cleaned during the week? Once again, having to change and adjust schedules for specialist rotations, recesses, lunches, etc. I can only imagine that at the secondary level, it would be even more difficult when needing to adjust students' entire class schedules. Students finally seem to know the routine, and families would once again need to adjust their schedule for this new change to the school year for only 7 Mondays. I hope you realize that these Mondays this year have been invaluable. Teachers work extremely hard and spend countless hours outside their contract time creating lessons, supporting students, contacting and responding to parents, attending professional learning, etc. When I left school yesterday at 4:45, there were still 10 cars belonging to teachers in the parking lot.
Renee, I'm gonna stop you. We hit the 3-minute mark.
Okay.
So for consistency, we'll put that in the record as well. And I do want to apologize. Actually, some of these comments are related to the agenda, and I should have stopped it and read them during then, but the first couple I let go through, so I thought we would just finish. Ryan?
I think you were fine to let them go
Okay.
because Mondays are not actually on the agenda tonight, so it was appropriate in the general period
Well,
of
okay.
comment.
Okay. All righty, we're going to move. I'm sorry, are there any other comments?
No, Mr. Cassioppo?
Okay. Any more comments on your end?
Seeing none online.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move on to item 8. Recommendation to name the weight room at Carson High School after the late Mr. Shane Quilling. This is for possible action, and Superintendent Stokes is going to present for us.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I know that when we reorganize the the board at the start of every school year, you are all wanting to get on the school naming committee. But I'm happy to say that our group has met in this particular agenda item, and I just want to say thank you. If I could just briefly name the individuals who served with me on the school naming committee this year and regarding this particular agenda item. We had parent Rob Heaton, teacher Jennifer Menifee, paraprofessional Paula Chatwood, administrator Cody Farnworth, and we had trustees Walker and Wilkie McCulloch. And we met on two different occasions to discuss a presentation that had been made to name the weight room at Carson High School after the late Shane Quilling. Coach Quilling passed away February 24th, 2018, and because of his longevity as a teacher and coach in Carson City School District, he worked for 18 years. He served as a head football coach, assistant football coach, assistant track coach, and also the head softball coach. Mr. Quilling had much to do with organizing and helping to establish the weight room at Carson High School, which really serves all of the student body who have interest either in extracurricular activities or as part of the health and PE program. Mr. Quilling was unanimously recommended to be named or to have his name used to rename the high school weight room. It should be said that Mr. Quilling did much in our community to help recognize and support youth. If any of you ever had an opportunity to observe the living Christmas card over at the Methodist Church, you may have seen Mr. Quilling there in a bathrobe, being very cold in the snow. But that was important to him, and it was one of the community activities that he was well known for. And so with that, Mr. President, members of the board, the school naming committee unanimously recommends that the weight room at Carson High School be named after the late Coach Shane Quilling.
Thank you, Richard. This is an action item, but if anyone wants to make a motion or has any comments, we'll start there. Stacy?
I'd like to make the motion, but I'd take comments before that if the board would like.
You feel free to make a motion if you'd like. We're going to have discussion anyway.
Okay. I move that the Carson City School District Board of Trustees approve the application to name the weight room at Carson High School after the late Mr. Shane Quilling.
Second.
Okay, motion, second by trustee Kareen. Any board discussion?
There we go, got it. Just a question, as I was reviewing our requirements for the members of the committee. And I don't know enough, I don't know everyone personally on the committee, but the facilities naming committee should include 2 trustees and also 1 parent of a child who will be attending the school. Was there a parent on there? Because
Yes, thank you,
Okay.
Trustee Crossman. The parent was Rob Heaton,
okay,
and
great.
he also serves as, he's involved in a number of supportive activities for the school district.
I just wanted to make sure that we had everybody on the committee that was required to be there.
We did, and then the other thing was we started this process before the 3-year had started, and so we did catch that at the very beginning, and that's why we didn't bring it to the board until this meeting in March, because it does get that 3-year commitment qualified.
I could just add a little more detail, but I believe the recipe for our committee also includes representatives from the employee groups. And so Jennifer Menifee is from our teacher ranks. Paula Chatwood is from our classified ranks, and Mr. Farnworth is a member of the administrative staff.
All right, thanks you, Laurel, for bringing that up. Do we have any further board discussion? I'll just add that, it's kind of bittersweet to name facilities after folks. There's always, when you look at the list of people, there are, deserving people out there. We've had a lot of great staff here at the district, and Shane Quilling was one of them. So, I'm happy that his name came up for nomination, and the committee felt strongly enough to unanimously support that. So with that, we'll bring it back to the board. Oh, I'm sorry, is there any public comment on this matter?
Seeing none online?
None online? Renee, anything via email?
No, Mr. Cassiopo?
All right, back to the board. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, none opposed, so this motion passes. Thank you very much. We're going to move on to item 9, presentation on the Advancing Wellness and Resiliency in Education, acronym AWARE, Project of Multi-Tiered Systems of Support, MTSS grant for the Carson City School District. This is for discussion only, and I believe remotely we have Dave Calero.
Yes, good evening. Can you hear me?
We can. Dave, how are you?
Very well, very well. Thank you. Good evening, President Mr. Cassiopo, Vice President Mr. Warner, members of the board. For the record, my name is Dave Calerio, and I am the School Social Worker and Mental Health Services Program Manager for the Carson City School District, and most recently, the Project Aware and MTSS Project Manager. So as always, thank you for making time for me and allowing me to present occasionally on the agenda. What I'd like to do is, this is in 2 parts, the presentation. I'll first go over Project Aware, and then after that part, I'll open it to any questions or comments, and then I'll follow that up with the MTSS, and then at the end, any questions or comments on either one or both of these particular grant awards. So I'll start with Project Aware, and do want to say that the 2 grants are very, very different. Although different, we like to say they go hand in hand or shoulder to shoulder. One grant program supports the other one immensely. So just as a quick introduction, Project Aware, it is a federal grant, and it's a 5-year grant, and it's administered by the Nevada Department of Education's Office for a Safe and Respectful Learning Environment. So the actual grant award went to the Nevada Department of Education, and the Carson City School District is one of 4 sub-grantees of that grant. It's overall $10 million grant, of which the Carson City School District is awarded $280,000 a year for 5 years. And very quickly, the other sub-grantees are the Washoe County School District. I'm not sure what their grant specific award is, but I'm sure it's the lion's share. The third sub-grantee of this Project Aware grant is the Nevada Charter School Association. And the fourth and final one is the state of Nevada's Office for Suicide Prevention. The MTSS grant, Multi-Tiered Systems and Support Grant, is a 3-year grant, and it's administered by a different entity, the University of Nevada Center for Excellence in Disabilities, and that is part of their Department of Education at the University of Nevada. Next slide, please. Thank you. And Mrs. Fusen, if you have any comments that you'd like to add, certainly please feel free, because you've been instrumental in this as well. So we have 7 pilot schools participating out of our 10, and I'll kind of break those up a little bit. All 7 of those schools are participating in Project Aware. All 7 will be participating in MTSS, but when I get to the second part of this presentation, the MTSS participation is staggered a little bit, so I'll get into that a little bit more. So you can see the schools that are participating, and most of them are elementary schools. As you can see, we have one high school, Carson High, and Eagle Valley Middle School. Next slide, please. So Project Aware, as I mentioned, it is a federal grant, and it has been available nationwide for entities, whether it be departments of mental health, state mental health throughout the United States, Department of Education throughout the United States. So the Carson City School District is very fortunate and honored to be a part of this. And I might add humbly that the Department of Education sought us before they even submitted this grant. We were the very first subgrantee that they approached. They wanted to know if we were interested. Administration says, yes, we are. So we wanted to go forward with that. Project Aware is more mental health focused, and it has the 3 key components. And this is just kind of scratching the surface. The next couple of slides after this one will dig a little bit deeper, but I'll go through them fairly quickly. So the first thing is the overall objective or goal is to increase awareness of mental health issues among school-age children. And again, these are more general. Some of the specifics will be in the next couple of slides as to how these will be accomplished. Number 2, provide training for school personnel and other adults who interact with school-age children to detect and respond to mental health issues. So this could be not only classroom teachers, this could be janitorial workers, this could be bus drivers, cafeteria workers, all to be sensitized to potential mental health signs and symptoms. They're certainly not expected to diagnose or to make any type of professional decisions, but the awareness has been a big part of mental health. And it emanated a number of years ago from substance abuse addiction and awareness, and to erase the stereotype of substance and drug abusers. The same with mental health issues. Most serious mental health are brain-based. Some are behavioral through childhood. So it's in an effort to create better awareness. And then connect school-age youth who have mental health or behavioral health issues and their families to needed services. And that would include building up the capacity within our own schools in the Carson City School District, as well as continue to partner, which we have for years, with the community partners. Next slide, please. So some of the grant's key requirements is implementing direct service provision in our schools. And the first couple of bullets there talk about mental health professionals. And what the feds would define through this grant as a mental health professional, it would be a licensed clinical social worker, or what we call in the field LCSWs. It would not include what we call MSWs, which are masters of social work, who have a regular, if you will, social work license as an LSW. In my estimation and research and talking to colleagues throughout the nation, about 2/3 of school social work typically is non-clinical. It's what our folks do. And then about 1/3 could be clinical. And again, when I mention clinical or LCSW, licensed clinical social work services provided, they are specially licensed to diagnose and treat mental illness, much like a clinical PhD psychologist or a master's marriage and family therapist. So we currently have 3 LCSWs in our school district. Unfortunately, 2 of those 3 are in non-participating schools. However, I have 2 others that are LCSW interns. It takes a couple of years, about 2,500 hours, and they're serving them both in their schools about 1/3 of their time diagnosing and treating mental illness under the direct and very careful supervision of a licensed clinical social worker who is certified in clinical administration for interns. And then the other two interns, LCSW, in addition to our schools, are also serving after hours on weekends during the summer in traditional mental health centers or clinics. So those are just a couple of the things. Referral, following a student from the referral, whether it comes from a teacher, a site administrator, the school counselor, all the way through services provision and follow-up is going to be key. We do that now, but through this grant, we'll get more technical assistance and training and tools to be able to do this, continue doing it and doing it better. And then some of these other last couple of things is we want to establish perhaps committees of students, peers, committees of students and parents that would be key stakeholders to help us. Right now, there's minimal, if any, involvement that way. So this grant and its goals and objectives and requirements will help us to reach out more to our families and students to get their important stakeholder input. And then the last one, establish relationships with local businesses, families, and community groups. I think we've done a very good job with community groups because most of our clinical services that are not provided in the school, our social workers do refer to a community partner to provide those services. We also have a number of non-clinical services as well. So that's just kind of a little bit of some of the detail of Project Aware that way. Next slide, please. This is the last slide on Project Aware. And for the sake of time and wanting to be mindful of the board's time, is I won't go through or show the scope of work, but as part of our agreement to be subcommittee, sub-grantee members of the Department of Education with this grant, we had to establish a very detailed scope of work, most of which is required by the grant, some of which there is some flexibility. We're in year one. We pretty much just started, and each year goes from the federal fiscal year, which is October 1st through September 30th. So we're, about a third of the way, a good third of the way into it. The first year is a planning year, which is very good. So we're planning this year for the next 4 years where we'll really be rolling up our sleeves and doing a lot of the work. Some of the things we accomplished this first year, very briefly, as required by the grant in our scope of work, is the school district did identify a local education agency, Project Aware project manager, and that is myself. We've identified our pilot schools. The real cool thing is that in the original scope of work that we wrote in the overall grant that was submitted to the feds almost a year ago, it took that long largely because of COVID, we had to have a minimum of at least 4 pilot schools. So as long as we had 4 of the 10, we were good. But we had 3 other schools that showed interest. So we're proud to say that we were able to add 3 to get to our 7. We also implemented a district-wide steering committee, that will help guide us through the process. And that is both a Project Aware / MTSS steering committee, again, separate but equal and comparable to each other. And the last part of this planning year is in order to spend the money that was allocated. For example, we can purchase social and emotional curricula and program manuals for our schools. We could also purchase restorative practices, which is a big thing, evidence-based practices, as well as universal screenings tools. And I'll talk about that in just a moment. So this concludes about half, just for the sake of where I'm at. Any questions or comments on the Project Aware before I go into the second part, which is MTSS?
Any comments from the board? Richard, Trustee Varner.
Thank you for the presentation so far. I was wondering, the $280,000 a year for this grant, does it allow for the hiring of any additional staff or payment for some salaries for part of the staff we have on board now? Or is it just for purchasing materials?
Right. Correct. Good question, Mr. Varner. It provides for a couple of salaries. One is mine, as my job is increased almost double from what it was before. So a little bit of that went into a reworked contract. However, we were also able to hire a part-time, steady part-time 20-hour-a-week program evaluator for Project Aware and MTSS, because there are some similarities of that. And many of you may know him. That's Dr. Steve Pradair. Dr. Pradair has served a long time with the Carson City School District. And I want to say he retired a couple of years ago and opened up a small practice, LCC. So the money goes to hire him for his contract to do the evaluation work. It does cover some of the materials that you referenced. It does not cover for salaries, because that was part of the grant that there's do's and don'ts. So other than a program evaluator and a project manager, those were the only two permissible salaries.
Thank you.
Of course.
Okay, no, we're still listening.
Okay, sounds good. Then we'll go into the second part, and we'll have one more opportunity here. So again, thank you. MTSS, multi-tiered systems of support. This is a framework that is also nationwide for schools and the Carson City School District has used this over the last number of years. I would say that we use it minimally to our advantage, probably for our students and families. So what MTSS will do for us over the next 3 to 5 years is to really help us develop in each of those three levels, one level each over the next year. And I'll go over that just in a couple of slides. And it's similar to Project Aware, but different. It's similar that it does include the mental health or behavioral health aspect, but it also includes a strong academic component, where Project Aware, again, is a little more mental health or more predominantly mental health, behavioral health focused. So it's a way to proactively identify students with both academic and behavioral health needs. Next slide, please. So some of the key symptoms of support systems is, and again, this does not, MTSS is very different from Project Aware. In the other sense is that not only does it have a different oversight, as I mentioned, the University of Nevada, but it also involves no funding, unlike Project Aware. All the support with MTSS is strictly, very comprehensively and very intensively support, technical assistance, education, training. And unlike Project Aware, where there was maybe a little more narrower search, like I mentioned, we were asked to consider to be a subgrantee. For MTSS, pretty much any school district in the state, if they're willing to invest the time, energy, and focus, could go through the process and perhaps be, subgrantees in the sense of, again, no monies, but technical assistance and training. So a couple of the things that MTSS would focus on, I mentioned universal screening. And this is of mental health issues in particular. This is, again, a phenomenon that many school districts throughout the nation use. Universal screening could be done in several different ways. We're not there yet, and ultimately that would be our administration's decision. For example, in some school districts, they have every single student screened for mental health issues or needs. Probably the better word is need. It's more positive. And then they might be screened at least one more time through the school year to see how they're progressing. In other words, you have a baseline of where they're at the beginning of school, and then how they progress through the year. Typically, screenings, if they're done universally throughout for the whole student in a school, it's recommended no more than 3 times, maybe twice at the very least. Another way to do universal screening is not every single student in the school, but maybe consider graduating from one level to the next. So, for example, maybe you screen all 6th graders going into middle school only, and then maybe you screen only 9th graders going into high school. It depends. All school districts are different. Schools are different. There are many pros to universal screenings. For example, it is more proactive and to establish a student's needs early on. Typically, how we do it is, if a student is either acting out or is showing academic stressors, chronic absenteeism, mental health issues, all of the above, then generally it's identified at that time after a period of time in which it goes as a referral from many avenues to the school social worker. Some school districts would say that for some parents, it would be a public relations stressor for the school district, and that a parent might say, wait a minute, you're insinuating that my straight A student that has never had a mental health issue or problem before, but there are consents to that. So there are ways that could be done. And again, Project Aware is very similar, that the money that we can use for universal screening tools, and again, we're not quite there yet. I think that's a year or 2 into the program that our administration will decide. So I wanted to spend just a little bit of time on what universal screening is and why it's used. You see some of the other things there. I'll just talk about one more, and that's data collection. That's probably going to be what I would call a very healthy challenge for us right now. Currently, our school social workers and staff document in Infinite Campus. The school social workers in particular, they use a tab where they do their referrals, their assessments, progress notes. If they have group work that they do, documenting that. But I don't think that's going to take care of the needs, the extensive needs that we'll need to do in collecting data and reporting data for both of these grants. Some data collection and reporting will be very similar. Others will be very different. So we feel that Dr. Ricky Medina is going to be key in that. He's on our state district-wide steering committee. I think he's going to be helpful. Then, of course, Dr. Prader is our evaluator as well. So I think those 2 individuals are going to help us immensely with that. Go to the next slide, please. So the 3 tiers, and I might have presented this a few years ago as we were kind of getting established. And this is what MTSS is tier 1 at the bottom, where you see it's the widest of the pyramid, is meant for as much of the school population as possible. So 75, 80, 85%, give or take. And tier 1 is more prevention in nature. So it would be, you see some examples here, anti-bullying programs, social and emotional programs. Universal mental health screenings would definitely be a tier 1 support. I've asked our elementary school social workers at lunchtime or during recess, get out there with the kids, talk to them a little bit. That could be a tier 1 intervention. So that would be key in terms of prevention. And again, the only thing I could base it similarly on would be, for example, a public health initiative. And a very good example of public health right now is the COVID vaccines that are going on, or prior to that, the flu shots. You provide health and benefits to a population at large as opposed to going into a doctor's office. And you can certainly get those services in an individual doctor's office. Tier 2 in the middle is meant for approximately 15% of the school. And again, there could be, a couple of percentage points given or taken depending on the school. Tier 2 is more small group work, and it identifies students that have like needs. So we gave a couple of examples: chronic absenteeism, anger management. This could be done both in a clinical setting or a non-clinical setting. And in most cases, our social workers do Tier 2 services in a non-clinical way. And then finally, Tier 3 at the top there for 5% of a student's population, maybe as high as 10, depending upon the school. And that's what I would call more traditional mental health or social work, which is individual one-on-one student intervention. Again, it could be clinical and non-clinical. Social workers that are LCSWs or LCSW interns, most likely if they're providing clinical services in their school, it will most likely be Tier 3 over Tier 2. But also some other services that we may not provide within our schools. That's why the community partners are so important. Home visits is one. Although with COVID, we've scaled that down. Our social workers do not go into the parent's home, but they will talk to them on their porch, in their front yard with masks and adequate social distancing. But for mental health and social work home visits, the psychosocial environmental aspect is a big part of social work. You get an idea. We know how kids may be performing in school academically or their behaviors, but what is their home life like? What are their parents like? What is the interaction, so to speak? And then students in DCFS custody, again, not all of our students will be, but many of them are, or students in juvenile justice services and support would be other examples of the 3 tiers. So next slide, I think I just have a couple more.
Mr. Clario, if I can jump in here, Tasha Fuson for the record. I also want
Thank you.
I want to include the fact that MTSS is not simply around social work or mental health. It's actually a structure that we look at the students behaviorally and academic as well. So you apply the same pyramid to when you look at universal screening, it's also looking at universal screening for student success on academics. It's also looking at student success in terms of behavior. And so your students who are frequent flyers to a discipline office, for instance, and looking at that in terms of what that student's needs are. And then it can entail mental health, as Mr. Clario was talking about, but I just wanted to make sure that the board realizes it's not solely and specifically and only for mental health. Our schools that are working on incorporating an MTSS structure within their schools will be looking at academic, behavioral, as well as the mental health piece under this lens.
And I have a question. When you're, and this is one of the things that I struggle with professionally also, is when you're looking at those screeners, is there a tool that you have already identified? And, what is that time commitment going to be for the students? Because we know mental health is important, but I think we start these years with MAP testing and a whole other range of assessments. And so at some point we have to make sure to do these types of things in a way that we're not impacting education further.
Absolutely, and that's part of what Mr. Clario is going to talk about next in terms of our steering committee and the work that group does. And that's exactly part of the discussions that we'll have, is how can we do that in the most effective way with the least amount of interruption to the academic environment.
Thank you, Mrs. Fuson, for piggybacking on that. That was a very good point. I know I mentioned at the outset it was both mental health and academics, but I should have mentioned that in the tiered part. You're absolutely right. So thank you for bringing that up. We have 3 teams, if you will, that are kind of going on. But one of the things that I wanted to mention in the technical assistance, and Mrs. Fuson is correct, these tiers involve both mental health and academics, because the mission of our school social workers ultimately is to assure that our students exceed academically. I think you could say that of a teacher, of a school counselor, of a school social worker, but how those entities assure academic success and educational success is slightly different. So again, a social worker's support will be a little different from a teacher's, from a site administrator. So I think that's a good point to kind of bring that all out to the open. So with MTSS, one of the things that we're looking at is, well, we had to do several things actually in order to comply with the MTSS. It's a little bit more structured than Project Aware is. Project Aware, there is some flexibility. So for example, with MTSS, what we had to do is agree that we would attend 3 meetings, which are called MTSS exploration meetings. So one of our 3 subsets or series of teams was a 14-member Carson City School District MTSS exploration team. So as part of this national MTSS model, the very start of it is that we have to go through 3 2-hour trainings over a 60-day period. And what the trainings or meetings do is there are both ways. It gives the school district an idea of what they would be getting into once the exploration period was over and they agreed to go forward with the program over the next 3 to 5 years. We learned a lot in terms of expectations with teams, coaches, trainings, different types of parameters and involvement that are going not only in our individual schools, but our school district. So that was the first part of that. And we did finish our last exploration team meeting on March 5th of last week. And the district decision was to move forward as a school district with MTSS. Now, I'm just talking MTSS now, not Project Aware. So what we have to do is a number of things. We have to now develop what's called a district leadership team, which in many cases is mostly or totally in some school districts, mostly in others, what the exploration team was. And that's both district administrators that are in a position to make decisions for the schools in the school district, as well as individual school members. So we have the exploration process. And what we decided to do with our 7 schools, all 7 schools are participating in Project Aware. However, MTSS offers what they call 3 cohorts of involvement. Cohort 1, and I don't know, Mrs. Houston, if that's the next slide. I don't remember. I'm seeing the slides a little bit smaller on my screen. Yeah, there we go. I think this might be just important to reference. So there are 3 cohorts, each a full year, a full school year. This is cohort 1, which is tier 1 of MTSS, both behavioral and academic. Tier 2 is the second year, and then again, that's the group work, both academically and behavioral and mental health. And then Tier 3 is the third year for school involvement, and that is, again, the individual that I discussed. What MTSS does, the MTSS statewide coordinator, is that they allow our 7 schools to do it in staggered ways, or what we call cohorts. So, for example, and Mrs. Fusen might also want to add a little bit to what I'm saying, in cohort 1, which we start right away this year, or at the beginning of the next school year, we might have 2 or 3 of our 7 schools start in cohort 1. And there might be a few other schools that say, yeah, we definitely want to do this, but we're not quite ready yet. We need to prepare, or we need to get through some other things. We may have a few more schools, 2 or 3 join in cohort 2, which is year 2. And then the third and final one for maybe a couple of schools, it may or may not work out exactly that way to join in tier 3. So you'll have kind of staggered tiers. And each of the 3 years, regardless of which of the cohorts the schools are in, they are required to have training in cohort 1, tier 1, I believe it's 6.5 total days for the year, staggered. In Tier 2, it's, I believe, 4.5 to 5 total days a year. And then in Tier 3, it's 4. Mrs. Fuson, did you want to add anything else to those cohorts?
To put that in the most simplest of terms, all of our schools, all 10 schools, will be expected to go through the training to implement a multi-tiered systems of support approach with their school. But not all schools have to start next year. Some of our schools will start next year, a couple more will start the year after, and a couple more the year after. It is actually 3 years of training for all schools. So this will be a 5-year project for our district to have all of our schools to have all of the training that they need. And it's not the entire school that goes through the training. There's a team at each school. Currently, we employ instructional consultation as the model in our district. We have been for several years. MTSS replaces instructional consultation as a way to really address the needs of your students and look at them. Again, that universal screening is looking at all of your student body. Who needs support academics? Who needs support with behavior? Who needs support with mental health? And then coming up with how can that look at a Tier 2, which is that small group intervention, and who needs more extensive support beyond that at a Tier 3? So that's really, in the most simplistic form, what's going to go on, is that our schools will receive training on how that is done, what tools we need to use in order to be able to do that, what data we need to collect in order to make sure that we're doing that with fidelity. And the partnership with UNR provides that training to our staff members as part of their grant. So we don't have to pay for that training. They'll partner with us. When it comes to a Project Aware, the reason why we married them together, if you will, is Project Aware really addresses the mental health part of MTSS. So it's like a subsection of MTSS. And that is actually where our district is getting the grant funds to help us support the overall umbrella of MTSS. So just kind of as a very quick synopsis of how we're looking at that program and how we're implementing that.
Thank you. And then the next slide, I believe, is the very last slide. And that is, I had talked about, we've developed 3 types of teams. Mrs. Fuson had discussed one of them, and that is what we're calling individual site-specific Project Aware and MTSS teams at each of our 7 pilot school sites. And those consist of anywhere from 6 to 9 members, depending upon the school. And ideally in the team, since it is Project Aware / MTSS, that you have, and we do in each of our schools, a nice combination, for example, of school social workers, school psychologists, school counselors, which are more maybe leaning towards the Project Aware piece, but we also on the team have site administrators, we have teachers, we have special ed folks, just kind of a nice complement that can work that way. I have met with all 7 schools individually, finishing a couple of weeks ago with the last one, to kind of explain this process. Some schools are a little bit further advanced with, for example, MTSS than others might be. So, and also it allowed them to ask questions, and we went into the academic and behavioral health. I think as part of my questions to them, it was 2 ways. I gave them information, and they were able to give me theirs, that most schools seem to be doing a little bit better on the behavioral or mental health piece of that pyramid. Some are doing okay with the academic, some maybe not. But that's why we're doing this. That's exactly why we're doing this. So that concludes. I really appreciate your patience. I know it's a lot of information, but did anybody have any questions, any final questions on either MTSS or Project Aware?
Yeah, Trustee Walker.
So
Hi, Mr. Walker.
Hi there. I'm just curious. So it sounds like we're still working on what the screener might look like, but are we matching this or pairing this with some kind of an SEL type curriculum to help teachers kind of meet some of these basic needs for that 80% in the classroom? And
I'm going to take that question, Mr. Clario. Thank you, Mr. Walker, for that question. So yes, and again, looking at that pyramid, multi-tiered systems of support, really it's a 2-legged thing, with one side being academics, one side being behavior / mental health. So at the tier 1 level, that is the basic instruction that goes on in the classroom every day. So as Trustee Walker is asking, do we as a district have SEL curriculum that we're utilizing in our schools? Yes, we do. One thing that we do need to do and that we want to focus on is seeing if we can come up with, as a group through this work, an adopted curriculum that will be used across all sites. Because right now, for instance, all 6 of our elementary schools are all using a different curriculum. We've left it up to the schools to kind of adopt the programs and curriculum that they felt, met their needs at the time. But as we've been evolving as a district, in order now to have this resource to be able to have a common expectation and a common curriculum, I think it's time for that so that we can look at that and implement that with fidelity. So yes, that is a portion to that. And then the same thing with instruction in the classroom. So that's that tier 1. 80% of your students, 80 to 85% of your students should be successful at that tier 1 level. And when you identify students then who are not being successful, either behaviorally or academically, some of them may have the mental health issues. That's when you look at providing tier 2 intervention support. So small group usually is what tier 2 looks like. In our district, we do pull, for instance, several students out for reading intervention or math intervention, or we have after-school programming to support that. We are a little bit thin on what we do on the behavioral end. What do we do with students who are, again, frequent flyers to the discipline office or being sent up to the discipline office because they don't know how to maintain their behavior in the classroom? So that's where we really need to explore and enhance our skills of our teachers on how to address those issues. And then once you do that tier 2 intervention level, you do get to that tier 3 where this should be approximately 5% or less of your students that really need intensive one-on-one support. So again, that's the structure that we're looking to put in place. That's the training that our collaboration with both of these projects is going to bring that training into our schools, into our school teams, and to our teachers.
I think that's going to be really helpful for students because we're seeing academically, emotionally, you know what I mean? There's just a lot of stuff going on in the minds of these kids. And so the more ways we have to support them and also support our teachers and being proactive and supporting the students, I think is huge. So I think it's a good thing.
The one thing I want to mention, and I appreciate you saying that, Trustee Walker, because really from my perspective and my role, it was our vice principals really primarily at the elementary level that were really asking for help. And asked us to kind of explore and check into what resources we had. So that led us down the road of at least looking at the MTSS project. Again, as Mr. Clario stated, they reached out to us about the Project Aware part, but when we had conversations, instead of having 2 standalone programs that really work on the same type of thing, we needed to put these together so schools could see how one complements the other and how they really end up. You have to have a very strong MTSS support system in your school before you can address the mental health issues at that tier 1, 2, 3 level. So it didn't make sense to separate them. It made sense to put them together so our schools could work more focused versus feeling that they're doing 2 separate things that get at the same end point. So that's exactly why we embarked on the project the way we did.
Trustee Varner.
I don't know if the district's going to move this way or not, but on the universal screening, would that have to be parent consent if you screened everybody?
Mr. Colario, do you want to take that?
Yes, they would need parental consent. I know that project and one of the things that we would have to decide or elements is that the universal screening through Project Aware is obviously mental health focused, where the universal screening, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mrs. Fusen, on the MTSS side would cover both of those areas. So ideally, we could find one screening tool that would meet those needs for the MTSS, since it does cover the academic and behavioral health needs. And yes, my understanding would be is it would either, depending upon, Trustee Varner, depending upon the screening tool that you use, and there are many national brands, if you will, out there that could be available for purchase. Some would require a parental consent on everybody. Others would only require if a parent disagreed with it, that they would not want their child to participate, and they'd have to return that. So I think it kind of depends on the ultimate screening tool that we would use.
some of them, when you look at screening tools, not all of them are like I'm sitting one-on-one with a student and going through this kind of a screening process. Some of that screening portion is really taking a look at the data that you already authentically collect in a school, right? Again, from an educational perspective, are students passing classes? Are they scoring at grade level on any kind of the high-stakes assessments that you have? Are they getting supports in other places? When you look at behavior, students who aren't getting in trouble and who aren't going to the discipline office, they're not going to show up with chronic absenteeism, that kind of thing. When it comes to mental health, some of that comes down to your staff looking at, do we have students that are exhibiting certain behaviors in the classroom that then makes us be concerned about wanting to provide additional support or more structured support? So I want you to think of that. It's not necessarily I'm sitting one-on-one with this student or this kid is the student's getting another test to take. That's not necessarily what screening is referring to.
Well, and I think that also it's easy to assume a successful student is mentally healthy. You know what I mean? And there's a lot of kids that have a lot of internalized struggles and anxiety at school that might spill over in test anxiety or different things that some of these screeners will help identify and help that student become successful. I think that we just want to make sure that we're doing it in a way that's not pulling away from core content.
Absolutely. And some of those are already incorporated, for instance, into instruction, like at the 9th grade level with health. We do the SOS program, Signs of Suicide program. And part of that program is actually a student survey, about how they're feeling, if they've ever had suicidal ideations, that kind of thing. And that is considered a screener of sorts. So that's what I mean. We'll have to look at it with our steering committee in general, look at what are our needs, what is out there, and how can we do that in ways that it makes sense, and that we can collect that information and provide those services to the students without it being an awkward or a add-on or something that's going to distract from the educational environment.
Good. Any additional board comments? Stacy?
I was glad to see that the training includes people other than the teachers, because I know from my own part that the custodians and the paraprofessionals really have a lot of contact with and can see the signs at different points too, and that they feel more comfortable coming to them than their teacher. I also think it says a lot about our district that we have put this much focus on the mental health of our students and wrapping that around their academics. And when we brought in those social workers, because we had the grant and then we got them benefits, I just think that says a lot of the direction that we're going and looking at the whole student and not just academics.
Thank you, Trustee Wilkie.
Yeah, good point. Anybody else? All right, well, thank you very much. Dave, thank you very much. Appreciated the presentation.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
All right. We're going to move on now to item 10, presentation, discussion, and possible action to open the Carson City School District schools to pre-K through 8th grade students to attend in person 4 days per week, Tuesday through Friday, effective March 23rd of this year. This is for possible action, and Superintendent Stokes will be the presenter.
Thank you, Mr. President. And trustees, it's good to be with you talking about this important topic. Kind of picking up from where our student left off, it was nice to see Sarah at the Carson High School Academic Letter Ceremony last evening. And as I pulled into the north parking lot, it was fun to see the school bubbling. The lights were on in the baseball field. There were young students out there playing baseball. The high school football lights were on, and there were students out practicing soccer. Inside, there were members of our strings program playing, and right behind those folks were the band. And of course, it was nice to just see families and students coming into the building. And so truly, we're in this time when we're moving to a higher level of energy and enthusiasm, and it's gratifying to feel that once again in our schools. So back in about the middle of February, we had the governor come forward and make some changes to educational restrictions. And up to this point, as you folks know, we have made several changes and modifications in our school year since August. And so if I could just briefly give you a little rundown of where we are right now, and you'll find that this is essentially the format that our schools are operating. Our pre-K students through sixth grades are now attending in person 4 days a week. Our 7th through 12th grade students are still within the hybrid model. And so they're in 2 different cohorts, which essentially has become the students who are attending the hybrid model cut in half. So essentially we have half of our student body who are attending the hybrid model, and that does not include the number who are in full remote. Full remote instruction is approximately 14% of our student body. Mondays have been reserved for remote instruction for all district students. During those Mondays, students are engaged in social and emotional learning curriculum. In addition, they also receive some assignments from their teachers. Teachers, as mentioned earlier, are engaged in a variety of different meetings and also use time during Mondays to prepare for their lessons the other 4 days of the week. It's also a time when Mr. Cornick and his crew, Mr. Silva and his crew, are engaged in deep cleaning, typically associated with sanitizing the building, cleaning those high touch points where there are concern for making sure that we're doing everything we can to keep the buildings clean and our students and our staff safe. On our buses, we have been operating under the 50% vehicle capacity. At times that has stretched us. Now with athletics and field trips being a bigger part of the activities at school, the governor has indicated that that bus ridership can increase up to 66% of the vehicle's capacity. I also like to just state that all of our educational staff have had the opportunity to receive vaccinations. And of course, we're still operating with face coverings being required, but instead of having our grades 9 through 12 social distancing at 6 feet, that has also been reduced to 3 feet. So that gives a brief explanation of our fundamental operations. And so within the governor's suggested recommendations, he has essentially said that instead of occupying 50% of our building occupancy, that number has increased to 75%. I'll talk a little bit later about why that challenges us in bringing students back to school. We anticipate face masks being required probably through the end of the school year, even though that hasn't been said, but it's still a part of our operations. And in thinking about bringing students back to school in greater numbers, the biggest challenge that we face is having the ability to combine the cohorts in such a way that we can maintain that 3-foot social distancing piece throughout our schools. So the location where we have the most challenges with this consideration is at Carson High School. I know many of you have been in that building. The classrooms are of varying sizes. And so I've invited Mr. Chambers to be in the room today as we have this conversation, just because he knows the building very well and very familiar with its operation. But if you think about that cohort concept and bringing half of the student body together with the other half. And if a basic classroom was scheduled at 25 students, but now we're bringing back another part of the student body, that number's going to automatically go higher. And so that challenges us because in order to manage that 3-foot social distancing piece, the more students you have in the classroom, you're challenged with furniture in the classroom, things like bookcases, tables, anything that might be in the room, in addition to the humans that need to be there. And of course, then the teacher has to occupy 6-foot social distancing as well. So all of these things come together, and the astonishing number here is that third bullet down, to where at least 176 classes at Carson High School are in excess of 25 students, and in some cases the number goes quite high. And so a rough calculation is that approximately 500 students at Carson High School would have to be rescheduled in order to meet that that social distancing component. So one of the big questions that you have to ask as we're talking about trying to bring all of our high school students back at least 4 days a week, could that actually work? Or are we willing to disrupt the operations to that extent to try to accomplish this? So really, Carson High School, I think, is the place where we're going to be the most challenged to bring more students back. And of course, the other challenge here that is associated with Carson High School is just the block schedule in and of itself. In order to really work the way it was designed, you need 2 full weeks. And within that 2-day cycle, students are able to visit all of their scheduled classes. So it's really difficult if you're to bring back all students within a 4-day school week. You have to really tweak and modify the classroom schedules. And so again, we're talking about really making a change of significant modifications if we're going to consider a full return to school at the high school level. At the middle school, it's a little easier. Even though by combining those cohort groups, you're still going to have more students in the classroom, and in some cases, those classrooms are not large enough. But by taking and purchasing the prep period of teachers, so if you are familiar with the activities that happen at the secondary level, teachers are given a schedule of at least the number of courses during a day, but typically they have one of those scheduled periods off, and that's the time when they grade papers, they follow up with concerns on email or by telephone, or they make preparations for other classes. If we're able to offer a teacher wages to give up that prep time, then that's time when they could teach another class. And so that allows us then to actually reduce a total number of students in a given classroom and actually make another section of that class, thereby putting more students in the classroom and in front of students. So we can do that at the middle schools, and by doing that at the middle schools, we're able to bring the 7th and 8th grade students back at least 4 days out of the week. And then one other challenge, and we heard some of the concerns today, is that if we don't have a universal working condition for our staff members, that's going to cause probably some concerns. So what we're proposing for your consideration this evening, and I already mentioned a little bit about the elementary schools, but with the changes that we've already made at that level, we're expecting really no additional changes to the elementary schools other than opening up the use of athletic equipment like balls and jump ropes and frisbees to be used during recess. At the middle schools, we'd like to bring back the 8th grade and the 7th grade students that are currently in the hybrid model to a 4-day school week, essentially. So they would be in school 4 days a week, Tuesday through Friday. And that would bring all of our middle school students, except those who are currently in the full remote system. And so we like that, what that represents to our students and to our families. Pioneer High School will remain unchanged. They have, right about the time we had the start of the first or the second semester, Pioneer High School was able to invite all of their students back to school 4 days a week. And so there's no proposed change at Pioneer High School. Where we have the most challenges in bringing students back to school again is at Carson High School. And so we are proposing that Carson High School's schedule remains the same within the hybrid model. That means that students would be in-person learning 2 days out of the week, and 3 days out of the week they'd be in a remote learning session. And again, that is going to be attributed to the fact that we would have to change the student schedule and essentially a family schedule for a large number of students in order to maintain the expectation around social distancing. So what that means for all students then is that there would be the remote learning opportunity on Mondays, as already described. There would be no change for students who are in the remote learning model. Those students and families would continue on with no change. One of the other changes that has occurred through the governor is that the secondary students, especially those in grades 9 through 12, instead of requiring 6 feet of social distancing, that number has been reduced to 3 feet. So that does give us a little more flexibility. And then, as per the governor, we're proposing that ridership on our buses be increased to 66%. So there's a lot in here, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have, and I'll leave this screen up so that you can refer back to those potential changes, and we can talk about any aspect of this that you might have questions regarding.
Thanks, Richard. Questions back to the board. Mike, I saw your hand up.
You know, I think that it's one of the challenges with this is we know it's really hard on families. And so I think the theme of the last year is teachers and staff are emailing us about the struggles, and families are emailing us about the struggles. And the opinions are differing on both sides. I think that also when you really think about the high school at this point, we have seniors who are trying to graduate. It's the end of their senior year. I don't know that that's a good thing to try to mix things up for them as they have a flow going right now. But I do think maybe one of the things we could ask Mr. Chambers to look at is, just like we talked about buying some prep time, maybe we could open up some lab time with, so those students who are failing and need that extra support might be able to sign up for some time to come in and work on some of their remote lessons, get some help from a staff member and get that direction. And so I think that's going to help. I think that our elementary schools are largely back. I think bringing back more middle school students will be great. And then I think that just some additional support for our high schoolers. And then I think that the other thing that I've been hearing this week is this is tough on the teachers too. And just like it's hard for seniors, I mean, we've asked these teachers to change what they're doing several times this year. And I think it's time to commit to what we've done and find a way to support not only our students, but our staff. And let's get through the year and hopefully start next year fresh.
Thanks, Mike. Don and then Laurel.
I'm disappointed we can't get the high school back. I think everybody is. I realize it would be a disservice to take 500 students and change and reschedule everybody. That's not reality. I would like you to even go a step farther than Mike said. For the kids that are really struggling academically, possibly mentally, is there a chance to target those kids and bring those kids back? I really would like you seriously to look at that.
Well, thanks for that, Trustee Carini. I can let you know that Carson High School has invited about 200 students back, and that started with the start of the second semester. And that was after reviewing students that were not doing well in their remote classes or not doing well in the hybrid model. And I know that it's an interest of mine and everybody in the communities to make sure that we're looking at those, especially seniors who are possibly going to be credit deficient going into the final stage of the school year. And I'm confident that the staff, the counselors, the administration at Carson High School are interested in the same thing. So those that have so much to lose, but also to gain, will be contacted and will be seeking some support for those students and their families. So we certainly don't want to have, if there's something that we can do, we don't want those kids slipping through the cracks because of a crazy school year.
I appreciate that.
Laurel. You can do this.
I know, it's, couple questions, and kind of following up with Dawn. I was thinking of the student athletes at Carson High School, some of whom will be missing their in-class day for their different game events. And hopefully there can be some flexibility with the decrease, the social distancing levels have been decreased. Perhaps some of those students could attend on their non-cohort days if they're missing because of a school event. And I second Dawn's idea that if there are students that are struggling, see if we can't give them some flexibility to attend. It looks like Mr. Chambers is coming up to answer. And I just agree too with the number of students that would need schedule changing. As much as I know those kids, and we know we're doing hybrid, we're doing the best we can, and we know it's still not the best for the kids. So I feel for all the parents that want their kids back in school. But I think if they were to look at it and say, wait, I don't want my kid to have this class changed and have to start over with a new teacher here, or maybe lose a class that they've done half this semester on and not be able to get credit for that class because they had to drop an elective that is important to them. So I understand that, but if there could be some flexibility maybe on those non-cohort days for either struggling students or student athletes who might miss, that would be.
Absolutely.
Too, which was back to the middle school students with bringing them back. And I know the buses have increased, but are we going to have difficulty fitting our middle school students on when we bring back 7th and 8th graders on the busing, or are we going to need to ask parents to drive and help us out in that situation?
There's a likelihood that will happen, and we'll ask our families to contact their schools, and in turn we'll work with the transportation department to try and see if we can accommodate the transportation piece so that we don't have so that we don't abuse that 66% ridership. Obviously, there's a limited amount of space on the buses, and if at all possible, if parents can help bring their children to school, that would be most helpful, much like what we've done in the elementary levels.
On that level, just to think outside the box, is it possible to maybe stagger 7th, 8th grade start times so maybe they could do multiple routes and get more kids if we're able to do that? It's a small enough community. I'm thinking the same bus. So bus 1 would come for the 7th graders, and then maybe go back and pick up 8th graders if we're able to do that. I don't know if it's feasible or not.
We'd have to really dig into it. In some cases, you may have families that both that have children in 7th grade and 8th grade. It can create some challenges, but it's not something that we would be opposed to looking at.
Richard, did you have a question?
I do have. I just wanted to say that I'm in favor of bringing the 7th, 8th graders back. Wish we could bring the high school students back. And I guess I agree with not trying to do it right now, but I was thinking that if there's half a year left, then I'd probably be more adamant in trying to find some way to bring them back. But what I wanted to ask you is, we just brought the 6th graders back not too long ago. Has there been any unanticipated problems or any kind of problems with them coming back 4 days a week?
Thank you, Trustee Varner, for that question. My discussions with the principals, they've seen nothing but positives. The students have been happy to be back. They've been excited for the opportunity to be back in school more regularly, more often. Really have no negatives. Obviously, with bringing the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade students back, that's going to create a condition that nobody at the middle school has seen this year yet. So there's a lot of kids, going to be a lot of bodies, but it's likely that they will maintain some of the events and operations that they've learned from in the past. For example, it's likely at Carson Middle School that they'll still not use their lockers, and that I know has been a good thing for the school. It may have been a challenge for the kids, but the kids already know those rules, and so I think they'll be able to carry forward without, having too much difficulty or problem. But it will obviously be different. One of the things, for example, that Carson Middle talked about as a challenge will be they'll probably have to change to 3 lunches just so that they're able to manage the social distancing for the lunchtime and the breakfast times. And so there will be those things. And just like any time we've brought students back, we've had to make some modifications just because there's been a greater number of students. And I anticipate that will occur again as we bring back the 7th and 8th grade students.
Thank you. Just one last thing. I'm anticipating and hopeful that this will be over by the next school year, other than we may have the social distancing to some degree, or maybe the face masks. But just in case, is there any thought of what we do at the high school for next year to get the kids back to 4 days a week? Maybe changing the schedule like we talked about to the middle school schedule and away from the block schedule?
We could actually maintain the block schedule next year. It would take going around setting, so you'd prepare for the worst case scenario, which would be like the half, the 50%, and 3 feet to 6 feet. Like, we could always go 50% or less, right? Like, we can do that. We know how to do that. It's when it gets to this weird number of 75%, like, that's where we're really struggling. Like, we can do 50% or we can do 100%. This in between is not really good for us. But you would prepare for that scenario. And how you would do that is you'd set caps on classrooms. So some classrooms are at 22, some classrooms are at 28. You set all your caps and then you build your schedule in that manner. And then you have your excess students who do not fit into the schedule. And at that point in time, Mr. Stokes and AJ don't like this solution, but either they give me more staff or we buy preps. I'm going to guess they're going to shake their heads. And at that point in time, you buy preps and you put the kids out in a broader basis, right? And then if things were to change and social distancing went away, then you can start collapsing before school starts. You collapse those preps, get back to normal size numbers, and off you go. The issue that we have right now is that's not how we built the schedule, if that makes sense. So yes, there is a plan, and I've already spoken with our counselors, and we will prepare for to do everything with that 3-foot social distancing, and because that's kind of
get the kids back in school.
Yeah. So yes, short answer, yes.
Thank you. Mr. Stokes, also one last thing, I'm sorry. But you mentioned purchasing the prep for the people in the audience and maybe other board members. Could you let us know how many students, how many teachers that's going to affect and what the cost will be?
We anticipate needing 8 prep periods purchased. And so at this point in the school year, that would leave about 1/4 of time left in the school year. And so we're thinking that we can buy the necessary preps for less than $20,000.
Dawn, and then Lupe.
Action, which would be the staff. And with the vaccines, I feel really comfortable that things are safer here. Anyway, I just wanted to thank.
Thank you. We agree wholeheartedly. It's brought a lot of comfort to staff to have the opportunity for the vaccine, and I know we're all grateful that our folks have done such great work here in our community.
One more comment. I mean, there's a lot of places in this country that haven't even gotten to their teachers yet. So bravo to Carson City and our area. That's awesome.
Lupe.
Okay, so I just want to echo the our appreciation for having a plan for those students that are struggling, because obviously it is everyone's concern. We want to make sure that we are giving them the option to improve. And then the one question I do have is, what are we doing with the students that are not on track to graduate?
So nothing really changes from what we've always done in the past. There's plenty of extra credits built into the schedule for those students who fall off, that their senior year just ends up to being a full senior year, and or our credit recovery program and or summer school programming. We've always been able to cover our students' credits through that fashion.
So we have the ability to align those students with whatever resources they need. In some cases, if they're actually behind credits, we have adult ed, we have our remote system, but the time's running out, and so we do need to make sure that we identify those students that have a chance to get to the finish line and make sure we provide them with the services they need.
And will the families be notified if their students are not going to graduate? Is that how it works? I'm sorry.
I was speaking generally 9/12, right? But for the students who are not on track to graduate, they are aware of that, and a plan is in place for them to graduate if it is mathematically possible.
Thank
you. Stacy.
Just to kind of piggyback on that, Lupe, they've always had a plan. It doesn't start their senior year. We had one that had lacked credits, and it started in sophomore year. We started meeting with Mr. Chambers' wife almost every other week to get on track, and so that so we weren't trying to pile it all in one semester. So I don't think you've changed those methods just because of a COVID thing. Just to kind of get some background, so with the prep periods, do the teachers volunteer for that, so that we're not doing anything against their contracts or anything? That's
correct. So just to try to go over that again, I probably went too fast over it. Mr. Chambers' school has got a 6-period day, essentially 3 periods really, but 7? Okay, I don't know. For the number of classes that are offered, each teacher will be assigned 1 less than the total number. And that 1 less period they're given to use however will help them in the best way to prepare for classes. And so when we figure out their salary, we can divide it by the number of classes that they teach, and that's essentially their salary. But if we ask them to teach 1 more, we basically are asking them to teach, or we give them 1/6 of a schedule more, And that's how we figure out that prep period. And so if that teacher was to start teaching by having their prep period purchased at the start of the school year, it amounts to about $7,500. Where we have about a where we have about a quarter left, then it's going to be reduced by that amount. So it really works out quite well. And so each teacher would cost us, who is willing to sell their prep to us to actually work during their prep time, is about $2,200.
And would
And
any
so
of-
at the middle school level, we need about 8 teachers to be able to do that, to make this work. And Dr. Conley has assured me that he already has the number of teachers necessary for that to occur with our 7th and 8th grade students.
Okay. And would that be covered by any of the COVID funds that we've received?
I don't believe so, but I'll defer to Mr. Fueling.
Thank you, Mr. Stokes. AJ Feeling for the record. So it could be. The money, at this point, all of the CARES funds that we have had access to are spent.
Okay.
But we have access to more funds coming soon. It's not determined when. But when those funds do become available, they are retroactive throughout this entire school year. So even if we started paying for these preps now, we could use those funds. It may not be necessary as we go through and do the final calculations on the cost. But if it helps the cause, we could certainly go that route.
And where are those care funds coming from? Is it from the new bill
These-
or is this from some?
No, these are from the December 30th, the second stimulus package that passed. What is now known as CARISA, or the ESSER 2 and Gear 2 funds.
Okay. And then as long as you're still up there, AJ. What about the lunch and the breakfast? Now that we're gonna have them in there 4 days a week, we're not gonna have to have them take home meals, or will they just do that on Fridays? Or how is that gonna work, and will our numbers go up because of it? And will people know that haven't taken advantage of this, that there's free meals available for lunch and breakfast?
Right. So from what we've seen, at least with, we're actually just looking at the meal numbers. So with bringing back kids at each level, the number of meals has increased pretty significantly. And that's in great regard to the fact that they're free. I mean, every kid is eating for free this entire school year. And actually, I think I just found out today that might have been extended through September 30th, so even to start the next school year. I'm not positive about that. I'll get back to you, but so that certainly helps. For the schools that are not doing the hybrid anymore, I believe I'm not sure if they are. I think they are still giving on Friday if kids want to take a Monday home. Not positive. I haven't checked on that, but the access, the full remote can still come pick up on Mondays for the week, so that is still available.
Thank you. And then will we have an option for those students like Lucas that don't feel comfortable coming back to school?
Are we talking next year?
No, he's talking about the one in public comment. He's worried about coming back full-time because he has older adults at home. So I'm thinking there's probably other kids that are worried about coming back 4 days a week instead of 2 because of that reasoning.
Well, my initial thoughts are that all of our teachers have been vaccinated. The only place that they're going to run into problems are going to be from other students. With board action tonight, I would assume that we'd be expecting all of our students to come back as stated. I guess we can change that individual to full remote if they have that many concerns, but it doesn't sound like that there's a concern with them going for 2 days out of the week, and we're asking them to come to 2 more, and it really is to the advantage of the student. So it would be my suggestion that we ask all those students to come back And if they have a real concern, then certainly we'd invite them to talk with their building principal.
Yeah, Mike.
And I think that, I think that that's the option at this point. If we're going to bring the kids back, you have two options. You're back in school 4 days a week, or you're a full remote learner. And I think that, so then they have to make that choice. So if there's health considerations, then we support them going full remote. But I think that we're killing our teachers. These teachers are prepping 3 and 4 different sections sometimes. You know what I mean? It's just,
I agree.
it's crazy. So I think we have to start marching towards normalizing operations as much as possible.
And I agree. I just bring up that question so that the people that don't feel comfortable with it know that they have an online option, and that we will, if they are at that point where they're thinking they're going to leave the district or something, that we do have an option to keep them in their same programs and their same grades by going online. That's why I brought that up. That I'm full ongoing having 4 days a week and getting people back in the school if they feel comfortable. But if there is for some reason that they don't, I'm hoping that I'm glad to hear that we have that provision.
Yeah, I think if it wasn't clear before, that's exactly right, is, we're bringing them back 4 days a week if we vote on this tonight and approve it, but we do have an option of full remote for students that, due to their own personal circumstances, need or desire that.
Right. And I agree, we're killing our teachers. We're killing all of our staff, our custodians, our lunch people, our paraprofessionals. It's not just the teachers that have been overwhelmed, and we can't, thank everyone enough for coming to the plate and doing it. I mean, none of us knew that any of this was going to happen, and to keep going and putting the students' needs first, I think has been amazing, and I thank every staff member we have for that. The only other question I have is the middle school halls. That was a problem when we didn't have COVID. How is that? Is there a plan for those?
That is something that could be addressed at the site level. There's a fairly straightforward way there where they can stagger when students are released and when there's a certain number of students in the hallway. So that'll be one of those operational things that the principals will have to work out.
Okay.
And I know when my kids were at Eagle Valley Middle School years ago, they already had a mechanism there to separate the grades. And of course, there was some crossing of grades, but for the most part, they had a pretty good system in place. And so they're not going to be starting fresh to figure out how to keep these kids at safe distances. It's going to be a struggle, I'm sure. But I think the site administrators have a pretty good understanding of their schools and how they can do that. So, I think Superintendent Stokes is correct that that's a site operations thing, but it's one that's, I think they'll say is doable.
Yeah.
From my brief conversations with the two principals.
I agree. I think there's just some concern there for some folks. And then the other thing is, now that we've gotten to the 4-day, I'm hoping that there's extracurricular activities that will start happening too at the middle school and the high school level. So we have a little bit more normalcy and a little bit more interaction there and opportunities. So, and it sounds like we're on that track. So I appreciate you guys looking at those too, because those are just as important at times, especially these times. So thank you.
Don.
I'll make a motion if.
I wanted to ask a question first, and if you don't mind. Richard, going back to the middle school and the buying the prep periods back, how is some of that going to impact the students? Are some of these students who were in a classroom now possibly going to be relocated to a different classroom and have a different teacher for the remaining of the school year, or how are we going to
Yes, there is, Mr. President, a likelihood that some students will have to have their schedules changed. And so there might be some logical ways that the principals are able to do that the counselors are able to assist in doing that, but it will impact some, because in order to reduce the number of students in any given classroom so that you can make another section, it's going to impact students.
Sure. Okay.
But the numbers are not going to be as high as for example, at Carson High School to do that.
Right, no, exactly. And those, I guess, just to make sure the parents know, and we understand that, these kids that come into this new classroom, if you will, with a new teacher, will be a a teacher that's, has expertise in that subject area. It's not going to be just a body teaching them.
Correct. Dr. Conley will seek out those individuals that are either endorsed in the subject or have had experience in teaching that or endorsed at least at the level that's required for that subject matter.
Okay. Richard?
I would just like to probably state that I think our goal would be to get the kids back 5 days a week next year. And just to let the staff and the parents know that may be listening, is that is the goal, so they can kind of plan if things are able to return to halfway normal or to normal. That would be the plan, right? To get the kids back in school 5 days a week.
That is certainly my expectation. As Mr. Chambers mentioned, so this year we started out with a hybrid schedule. So we started out scheduling according to what we knew at the time. Kind of having gone through 3/4 of this year and learning along the way as this pandemic has unfolded and we've had changes to the guidance from the governor or restrictions added or taken away as the case might be, we can start next school year scheduling appropriately. So even if we know we still have to do the 3-foot social distancing, we can schedule those initial schedules for each student accordingly. And as Mr. Chambers mentioned, it might mean that we need a few more staff members in order to make that happen. But we would at least going into next school year with the idea that school would look as normal as possible, that if I'm assuming the block schedule is still a desirable schedule for our high school students, then we could schedule that accordingly. We would have enough teachers to go around. And certainly the same thing would be true at the middle schools. You know, as the students get larger, their 3-foot distances grows, and it just takes more room to house those students. And some folks watching this might wonder, well, I know that in Douglas County or in Lyon County, they're bringing students back fully. And I could only answer that by saying that the conditions are different. In most of those high schools, they don't have the same number of students that we enroll. And consequently, they may have other flexibilities that we don't have. And so it's just important, I think, for us to all recognize that our school district is unique and different, and we have to react to the conditions and the situations that we have.
Mr. Stokes, but what we do have is Mr. Chambers, and he's going to work overtime this summer to make sure that he could accommodate all those kids next year.
I'm getting more and more gray hair.
You better check with Mrs. Chambers.
Out of his wife's hair.
More from Richard and Lupe? Okay.
I just wanted to thank you, Mrs. Stokes, and your staff, all your leadership staff, the principals, and everybody who's had a lot of input into trying to get the kids back to school. I know it's not easy. You guys worked hard at it. And I can speak for myself. I appreciate all the work you guys have put in.
Thank you.
Lupe?
So just for my clarification, so for the high school seniors that are struggling or at risk of failing, the parents have been invited or have been informed, or are the students have been encouraged to come and utilize that extra support? I'm sorry to ask this question, but I just want to be clear on what is the actual, what is the option that these students have in terms of how we can help them progress, and how will the parents be involved in the conversation?
So when a student falls off track before their senior year, their schedule's just reworked, right? So that they can maintain the proper credits to come back on track. Their senior year, so everyone would be notified as soon as you're off track that your student is off track for graduation, right? But it becomes a bigger deal your senior year because your amount of time that you can actually gain credit has been severely reduced, right? So then that plan is shared with the students and the parents as to basically if it's going to be night school to receive credit, if you have to do a credit recovery course, or if adult ed is now your only option to receive a high school diploma. So yeah, the families are all kept in the loop as to like, these are the pathways that you can be successful, right? But there is the hard conversation at points in times where seniors, it is not mathematically possible that they graduate from our high school, right? So that conversation is also had with families and the students.
So in certain cases, that student or that family could become a fifth-year senior, requiring them to have another year to earn the credits necessary to actually get the diploma.
Perfect, thank you. That's clear now. So the other question is, will we have a second graduation?
So as we get closer and we start to figure out where all of our seniors are, and if we have I mean, realistically, if we have a cohort of one that wants a summer graduation, I would do it, right? It'd be a pretty small gathering. But if the cohort realistically is a large enough cohort to have a summer graduation, we would do that. Probably not in the summer. I think in the past we did it in August when we returned to school. So, but yeah, that would summer graduation would definitely be an option.
Awesome, thanks so much.
Laurel.
Just one more comment. Just because I was one of the people thinking in my head, hearing that Lyon's coming back with their high school and Douglas is coming back, and I was thinking, try harder. And I kept thinking, we have a small gym, we have a big gym, we have a library, we have all this extra space, but we don't have the extra space for 176 classrooms that are too full to fit the overflow. And so getting into it, I just want to thank you, Mr. Chambers, for really digging in and trying as hard as you can on that. And I hope that our community realizes that this is something that we want, that our principal wants and staff want for the kids too, but logistically it isn't able to fit in our building with the students that we have. And I want to thank the school too for this year continuing to offer all of the CTE electives, all of the AP electives, all of those things that make Carson High so great and can give so many opportunities for students, because there are other schools that have cut curriculum classes and offerings in order to fit with that. So I think our students still have had as full of an experience as they can given the circumstances of this year. So thank you.
All right, if we don't have any more comments, I think Dawn wanted to speak and make a motion.
I move that the Carson City School District Board of Trustees approve opening Carson City School District schools to pre-K through 8th grade students to attend in person 4 days per week, Tuesday through Friday, effective March 23rd, 2021.
Okay, we have a motion by trustee Carini. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, second by trustee Varner. I saw trustee Walker's hand up also.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Any further board discussion? I'll just add, I'll kind of repeat some of what I heard, but Richard, thank you very much for the effort of you and your staff. Thank you to the teachers. I know, some people think, boy, why are we rushing into this? This has been a challenging year for everybody, students, parents, the school district. And we're not rushing into these decisions, but a lot of times we don't have a lot of space to digest this for too long. I mean, the governor just made these announcements, but I think everybody's really jumping through hoops the best they can and in the best way possible to do what's best for these students and to be sensitive to the teachers, the families, and everybody. So I just ask that everybody continue to be patient, work with us the best you can. We recognize the hardships. I hope you recognize the hardships. And, nobody asked for this. We inherited this, and everybody's doing the best we can. But I want to thank everybody. We ask a lot of our teachers and our staff, and we're certainly not asking any less of them this year. So thanks to everybody. Do we have any public comment on this topic?
Currently seeing none online.
Thank you. Renee?
Yes, Mr. Cassiopo. Our first comment is from Miss Jen Allen. She's a third grade teacher at Mark Twain Elementary. And in her opinion, she believes that we should keep the Monday schedule as it is for the rest of the school year. And there are many reasons. She's going to share 3. First, my students are fully remote. They Zoom with their teachers for specials every Monday. If Mondays are removed, my students will not be able to meet with their specials teachers. My students need this interaction. Secondly, IEPs and 504 meetings, parent conferences, professional training, staff meetings, grade level planning, and vertical alignment planning several grade level happen on Mondays. Thirdly, there are only 7 Mondays left in our school year, 4th quarter. If Mondays are brought back, the calendar would need to be altered once again for the time our school district takes for meetings and early release days. This interrupts teaching and learning. Our teaching time currently is not interrupted through the week because of all the meetings that take place on Mondays. In conclusion, Mondays are invaluable. To dedicate one day for all meetings, conference, and planning allows teachers to focus on teaching Tuesday through Friday without disruptions and interruption. Thank you.
Thank you.
And the second comment, Mr. Casiopo, this is from Francesca Quintana. And she is asking, could they look at split times? For example, 7th graders in the morning with our 6th and 8th graders in the afternoons. So this way, all buses can escort the students to and from home, and everyone will be fed both breakfast and lunch, or take a sack lunch for dinner. We did a similar schedule like this a few years ago for our testing sessions. This could apply to middle schools only to return Tuesday through Friday.
Thank you. Any additional?
No, Mr. Casiopo, that's all the public comment.
All right, thank you. So we have a motion, we have a second, we've had discussion. I'll call the vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, hearing none, motion passes unanimously. Mr. Stokes, thank you very much. Okay, we're going to move on to item 11, discussion and possible action on implementation of the Silver State Governance Program for the Carson City School District Board of Trustees. This is for possible action, and I'll present on this. I want to let the public know that prior to our 7 o'clock start time, we did have a board workshop that was agendized. So we've had a little bit of discussion on this topic, but for the benefit of folks, I'll give a brief introduction. The Silver State Governance Program was training that we as a board went to a couple weekends ago. And in fact, Trustee Walker received a training about a week prior to the rest of us due to his affiliation. And
A few weeks prior.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And really what it is just a way to stay focused on student outcomes, and they give you guidelines and strategies, to make sure you're a student outcome driven district. And so the theme of the 2-day training that we went to was student outcomes do not change until adult behaviors change, and that starts with each of us individually. And what it is, it's a continuous improvement framework for governing teams that commit to focus on improved student outcomes. It centers on, the ideas behind it center on goals, on SMART goals, and on what we learned are guidelines that help to support those goals, guardrails that help to support those goals. And some of these goals and SMART goals are either directly or indirectly focused on the student outcomes. And some of it is understanding when you're putting a goal in place or you're putting a framework in place, is this directly impacting the students, or is this really directly impacting the support mechanism that in turn helps to support the students? And again, it's just to keep everybody on task. And what we're trying to do tonight is discuss the program and decide whether or not as a district we want to adopt it. And as I'm doing this, I'm fumbling through my notes, so I apologize. We're looking at several options here, since this is an action item, and our possible actions include taking action to fully implement the Silver State governance model, taking action to partially implement the model, taking no action regarding the Silver State governance model, or tabling the item. And so I wanted to, right now, open this up for some more board discussion, and just get your thoughts on, I think I know where we want to go, but I want to get your thoughts on record as to where you think we should go with this. So I'll just open it up right now to anybody, and Trustee Carini, you want to start us off?
I would not be in favor of fully implementing this right now. I am in favor of taking the strategic plan and maybe implementing some of these SMART goals definitely into it. Now, I don't know if that would be a partial implement or not. The board can decide that. But that's where I stand right now.
Okay. Laurel?
It worked this time. Just as far as partially implementing it, I'm not sure because the program is set to have facilitators and coaches walk you through it. So I'm not sure how we would partially implement it. I mean, I like the idea of taking some of the ideas, but I'm worried if we decide we're going to partially implement it, that might incur some of that facilitator costs. So,
I guess.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing, and Dawn, correct me if I'm wrong, is when you say partially implement it, I think taking some of the ideas that we think fit into what we're trying to do with our strategic plan and filling some holes, if you will, that we think might need filling.
I agree with that. I would not be in favor of really spending a lot of money right now on bringing in anybody.
Okay. Mike?
I was just gonna, just stating the obvious, we spent a lot of time already discussing it, so I think we're prepared to take action. I don't know that we need to have staff sit through.
Yeah, no, I don't want to
session.
spend a lot of time doing it, but for the benefit of the public, I wanted to just give a quick introduction and get some of the key thoughts on record. If somebody's ready to make a motion on this, I'm happy to go that route. Stacy, you had your hand up?
I'll make a motion. I also wanted to thank Mrs. Campbell and her staff for allowing us to have our workshop at the library, and to thank the Carson High students because they didn't get to go to the library that day. And for some of those kids, I think that might have been a hardship. And for that, I'm sorry, but we did get a lot out of it, and it was really good for our board. So I do thank them and the staff. But I move that the Carson City School District Board of Trustees not implement the Silver State Governance Program for the CCSD trustees.
Okay, have a motion by Trustee Wilkie McCullough. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, second by Trustee Crossman. Do we have any further board discussion? Seeing none, do we have any public comment on this topic?
Seeing none online.
Thank you. Renee?
No, Mr. Cassiopo?
Okay, we'll bring it back to a vote. All those in favor of the motion made?
Aye.
Do we have any opposed? Thank you. Motion carries as read. Okay, we're going to move on to item 12, approval of the consent agenda for possible action.
I'll move that we approve the consent agenda as submitted.
Okay, do we have a second? All right. We have a motion, a second. Any discussion on the consent agenda? Seeing none. Any comments on this from the public? Sorry, do we have any public comment?
Seeing none online.
Thank you.
No, Mr. Cassiopo?
All right, thank you. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Informational items for discussion only. No action will be taken. Board members have information in front of them. Any questions or comments related to these? Seeing none. How about item 14, requests for future agenda topics? Mike?
You know, it seems every year about this time we start getting emails or comments like Miss Ikahara's about from the elementary librarians, and I'm assuming maybe all the school librarians. I think maybe an agenda item about what that workload is. I know that there's challenges checking in all the computers and equipment. It's just, it seems like every year about this time we start hearing about this. And so maybe now's a good time to kind of look at what those tasks might be, and can we share the wealth a little bit so that they're not overwhelmed? Are we giving them enough time? I know they have additional contract days. Is that enough time? But I think that it's time to have that discussion.
No, I think that's valid. If we could get that, Richard. All right. Any additional requests for future agenda items? Richard?
I'd like to see a presentation on this year's MAP scores to see how this year's impacted them, whether positively or negatively.
And I
from
figure
the
that'll be
school.
coming up eventually, but yeah, I think as timely as we can be on it would be helpful. Okay. Did I miss any? Any others? Seeing none, we won't prolong this. We'll move to adjournment. Thank you, everybody.
Goodbye.